Billionaire CEO divorced her for being barren. She returns as his heart surgeon with secret quadruplets. I have 4 children you've never met. These 7 words shattered Connor Hamilton's world as he stood frozen, staring at the woman he'd walked away from 15 years ago. The tech CEO, who commanded boardrooms with unwavering confidence, now trembled before Dr. Julia Parker, his ex-wife, and 4 teenagers with his eyes, his smile, his blood. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the sudden silence of the community center porch. "You can't have children," the doctors said. "The doctors were wrong," Julia replied, her surgical mask now hanging around her neck, revealing the face he once loved. The face he had abandoned when she needed him most. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you threw me out of our home. Quadruplets. Your quadruplets. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to discover that the life-altering decision you made was based on a devastating mistake? To realize that the family you thought you'd never have has existed all along, growing, thriving, and living without you for 15 years? Connor's heart monitor would have been beeping frantically if he'd still been in the hospital where Julia had saved his life just days earlier. A life he'd built worth billions. But standing on that community center porch, he realized he was actually bankrupt in everything that counted. 15 years of birthdays, first steps, and bedtime stories gone forever. Could any amount of money buy back the time he'd thrown away? Would these 4 strangers ever call him Dad and mean it? Could Julia forgive the man who abandoned her with 4 heartbeats inside her? Or would Connor's desperate attempt to become the father he should have been end in rejection? If you've ever made a mistake you thought was beyond repair, you're about to witness what happens when fate offers a second chance that no one saw coming. Before we continue, who among you has not subscribed yet? If you believe karma is real and this man is about to learn a painful lesson, like this video, share it, and subscribe right now. And if you refuse to subscribe, tell us in the comments why, because we all want to understand that decision. Despite having everything money could buy, a technology empire valued at billions, an architectural marvel of a penthouse, and global recognition, an emptiness gnawed at Connor Hamilton. He sipped his lukewarm coffee, its bitter taste mirroring the regret that occasionally visited him in quiet moments like these. 15 years of relentless work had built his empire, yet something vital was missing. Success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd walked away from his marriage to focus on building his legacy, only to create an empire with no heir to inherit it. "Another day, another dollar," he muttered to himself, the old phrase his father used to say now, a cynical reminder of how far he'd come from his humble beginnings. The next morning, Connor descended in his private elevator, perfectly dressed in a custom Italian suit. His driver waited at the curb, door already open. "Good morning, Mr. Hamilton," said Michael, his driver of 8 years. "Morning, Michael. Riverfront offices today. Board meeting at 9. As the luxury sedan glided through morning traffic, Connor scrolled through emails on his tablet. A notification from a local news app caught his attention. Normally, he ignored these, but a familiar name jumped out at him. Local hero. Single mother successfully raises quadruplets against the odds. The headline alone made him pause, but the accompanying photo froze the blood in his veins. Julia Parker, his Julia, stood smiling, surrounded by 4 teenagers. His finger trembled as he enlarged the image. 2 boys and 2 girls, all around 15 years old, all with his distinctive green eyes. Have you ever had that moment when your past crashes into your present with such force that it leaves you breathless? When a single image on a screen shatters everything you thought you knew about your life? "Michael," Connor's voice cracked. "Change of plans. Take me to Hope Haven Community Center instead." "Sir, the board meeting. Cancel it." Connor could barely hear his own voice over the thundering of his heart. "Family emergency. Family emergency." The words felt foreign on his tongue. He had no family not since. Memories flooded back. Julia's voice on the phone 15 years ago, breaking with emotion. He'd been so wrapped up in securing his first major investment deal that he'd barely listened. She was pregnant, that much he'd understood. But in his fear and ambition, he'd made the worst decision of his life. "I can't do this right now, Julia. The timing is all wrong. Maybe after the company takes off." He transferred money to her account, assuming that would solve the problem. Days later, divorce papers arrived. He signed them without contesting, believing he was doing what was best for both of them. Had she said she was carrying multiple babies? Had he been so self-absorbed that he missed this crucial detail? Or had she not known herself at that early stage? You might be wondering how someone could miss such vital information. But haven't we all been guilty of hearing only what we want to hear when we're afraid of what the truth might demand of us? The car pulled up to a modest brick building. Hope Haven Community Center read a simple wooden sign. Children's laughter drifted from an open window. "Wait here," Connor told Michael, his legs unsteady as he stepped onto the sidewalk. A mural decorated one wall of the center, vibrant colors depicting children holding hands across a rainbow bridge. Connor approached the entrance, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the open doors, he saw a gathering in the main room. A small celebration appeared to be underway, and there she was, Julia, moving among the guests with practiced ease, her smile warm and genuine as she spoke with community members. She looked different, yet the same. Her blonde hair was shorter now, brushing her shoulders instead of cascading down her back. Laugh lines framed her eyes, eyes that had once looked at him with such love. She wore simple jeans and a Hope Haven t-shirt, a far cry from the corporate attire she'd worn when they first met at his startup's launch party. Before Connor could retreat or advance, a teenage boy appeared in the doorway. Tall and lanky, with familiar green eyes, he stared at Connor with curious intensity. "Can I help you?" the boy asked, his voice deepening but not yet fully matured. Connor opened his mouth, but no words emerged. This was his son, his flesh and blood. The boy had Connor's jawline, his mother's nose. "Noah, who are you talking to?" A girl appeared beside the boy, followed by two more teenagers, another boy and girl, quadruplets, all with his eyes. Connor swayed slightly. The ground beneath him seemed to shift, reality itself rearranging around this impossible moment. 4 children, his children, standing before him like ghosts of a future he'd discarded. I'm looking for Julia Parker," he finally managed. "Mom," called the second boy, turning back toward the room. "Someone's here for you." Julia appeared behind her children, wiping her hands on a small towel.
"What is it, Lucas? We're about to cut the—"
She froze when she saw Connor. The towel slipped from her fingers. "Connor." His name escaped her lips as barely a whisper. "Hello, Julia." Connor's voice trembled. "It's been a long time." The 4 teenagers looked between their mother and this stranger, confusion evident on their faces. "Kids," Julia said, her voice strained but controlled. "Could you please go help Mrs. Chen with the refreshments? I need to speak with this gentleman." But Mom began one of the girls. "Please, Mia, just for a few minutes." The children reluctantly retreated, casting curious glances over their shoulders. The way they moved as a unit, communicating with subtle glances and gestures, spoke of a lifetime of connection that Connor had missed entirely. Have you ever witnessed the silent language that develops between siblings who've grown up together? The unspoken communication that comes from sharing a lifetime of experiences? It's something money can't buy, and time can't rush. And Connor was seeing it for the first time in children who were already teenagers. Julia stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Her composure was remarkable, but Connor could see the slight tremor in her hands. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. "I saw the article about you and the quadruplets." Connor's voice caught. "Julia, are they—" "Yes." Her response was clipped. "They're yours. All 4 of them." Connor leaned against the porch railing for support. The world tilted around him, past and present, colliding with dizzying force. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. Fire flashed in Julia's eyes. "I did tell you. You were too busy becoming a tech mogul to listen. And then you made it abundantly clear. You wanted no part of it." "I never knew there were 4 of them," Connor whispered, the magnitude of what he'd missed crushing down on him. "Would it have made a difference?" Julia challenged, her voice sharp with 15 years of buried pain. "One child wasn't worth staying for. Would 4 have changed your mind?" Her words cut deep because they contained truth. Connor had no defense. What could he possibly say to justify abandoning her, abandoning them for the empire he'd built? "What are their names?" he asked instead, desperate for any information about these strangers who carried his blood. Julia's expression softened slightly. "Noah is the oldest by 2 minutes. Then Lucas, Mia, and Ava." "They're beautiful, Julia," Connor said, his voice breaking. "You've done an amazing job. I had no choice, she replied. But there was no bitterness in her tone, only the simple statement of a woman who had faced impossible odds and triumphed. Connor swallowed hard. I want to meet them properly. Julia crossed her arms. Why? After 15 years, why now? Because I was wrong, Connor admitted, his voice breaking. So terribly wrong. I've made millions, but I've never been happy. Not really. And seeing them, seeing you, I realize what I threw away. Julia studied him, searching for sincerity or manipulation. Connor stood before her, stripped of his corporate armor, just a man facing the consequences of his choices. The door opened and all 4 teenagers spilled out onto the porch. Mom, said Noah, clearly the spokesman, we couldn't help overhearing. Is this guy really our father? Julia sighed, shooting Connor a look that clearly said, this is on you. Connor took a deep breath. Yes, I am your father, though I haven't earned that title. He looked at each of them in turn. My name is Connor Hamilton, and I'm so sorry I haven't been here. The Connor Hamilton? Asked Lucas, eyes widening. The tech guy? Tech Fusion CEO? Connor nodded uncomfortably. Cool, Lucas exclaimed, then quickly tempered his enthusiasm at his mother's sharp glance. Ava, the quietest of the 4, studied Connor with searching eyes. Why did you leave us? The simple question hit Connor like a physical blow. How do you explain ambition and fear to a child who has only experienced their consequences? I was scared, he admitted, the truth finally emerging after 15 years. And selfish. I thought my company was the most important thing in my life. He met Julia's gaze. I was wrong. Mia stepped forward. Are you back now? Like, for good? That's the question we're all wondering, isn't it? Can someone who walked away from his family for 15 years simply walk back in? Should he even be allowed to try? That's not for me to decide, Connor replied carefully, aware of the fragility of this moment. That depends on your mother, and on all of you. Julia's expression remained guarded, but something in her eyes had shifted. Perhaps she recognized the genuine remorse in his voice, or perhaps she was simply calculating what was best for her children. I'd be honored if you'd give me a chance to get to know you, Connor continued, addressing all 4 teenagers. To learn who you are, what you like, what you dream about. The quadruplets exchanged glances, their silent communication excluding both adults. We could start with dinner, Noah suggested finally. Tomorrow night, maybe? Connor looked to Julia, not wanting to overstep. If that's okay with your mother, Julia hesitated, then nodded slightly. Dinner tomorrow would be fine. 6 o'clock. Thank you, Connor said, relief washing over him. I'll be here. As he prepared to leave, Noah approached him awkwardly. So, should we call you Dad, or... You can call me Connor for now, he replied gently. I need to earn Dad. He exchanged contact information with Julia, promising to arrive at 6 the next evening. As his car pulled away, Connor looked back at the 5 figures standing on the porch, the family he never knew he had. Tears blurred his vision as Michael navigated back toward the city center. Are you all right, sir? Michael asked, concern evident in his voice. No, Connor replied honestly. But I think for the first time in 15 years, I might be heading in the right direction. If you've ever wondered if it's too late to fix a terrible mistake, Connor's story might give you hope. But the real question remains, can 15 years of absence be forgiven? And even if Julia and the quadruplets allow him into their lives, can he ever truly make up for the time he's lost? If you're invested in finding out what happens next in this family's journey, hit that like button and subscribe now. The path to redemption is never simple, and Connor's has only just begun. Connor sat in his car outside the modest 2-story home, clutching a bouquet of lilies, Julia's favorite flowers from years ago, and 4 wrapped packages. He'd spent hours selecting gifts that might appeal to teenagers he knew nothing about. For Noah, a high-end drone. For Lucas, a coding kit. For Mia, wireless headphones. For Ava, an art tablet. Would they see these presents as genuine gestures or transparent attempts to buy affection? His watch read 5:55 p.m. After 15 years of absence, being precisely on time seemed crucial. The front door opened before he reached it. Ava, the quietest of the quadruplets, stood in the entryway. Up close, Connor noticed her freckles, just like Julia's, scattered across her nose. Hi, she said softly. Mom's finishing dinner. Thank you, Ava, Connor replied, stepping inside. He offered her the flowers. Could you give these to your mother? Ava accepted them with a shy smile and disappeared into the kitchen. The home felt lived in and warm. Walls adorned with children's artwork and family photos chronicling 15 years of milestones he'd missed. School awards, sports trophies, and handmade crafts lined the shelves. Connor's throat tightened at a framed photo of 4 gap-toothed 7-year-olds blowing out birthday candles. 7 birthdays, he whispered to himself. 15 Christmases. First days of school. 60 report cards. Came Julia's voice from behind him. She stood wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, Ava at her side with the lilies. 4 first steps, 4 first words, 4 chickenpox outbreaks. Connor turned, unable to mask his regret. Julia, Dinner's ready, she interrupted, her tone neutral but not cold. Kids, table. Thundering footsteps announced the arrival of the other 3 teenagers. Lucas bounded down the stairs while Noah and Mia emerged from different parts of the house. Whoa, presents! Lucas spotted the packages in Connor's arms. Julia raised an eyebrow. Connor, you didn't need to. I wanted to, he said simply, though I realize gifts can't make up for lost time. Think about that for a moment. What gift could possibly compensate for 15 years of absence? What present could bridge the gap between strangers who should have been family? Dinner was homemade lasagna. Connor remembered it as Julia's specialty with garlic bread and salad. The conversation started awkwardly, with long pauses and uncertain glances. So, Noah finally said, You make computers or something? Connor smiled. Something like that. My company develops software and technology solutions. We started with mobile applications, but now we work on larger systems. Like what? Lucas leaned forward eagerly. Like the operating system in your school's computer lab, Connor replied, and the security protocols that protect online banking. That's actually pretty cool, Lucas admitted, his eyes lighting up with interest. Is that why you left? Mia asked bluntly. Because you were busy making all that stuff? The table fell silent. Julia looked ready to intervene, but Connor shook his head slightly. No, Mia, he answered honestly. I left because I was afraid. I wasn't ready to be a father, and I convinced myself that my work was more important than family. He met Julia's eyes briefly. It was the biggest mistake of my life. The raw honesty of his answer seemed to surprise everyone at the table. For a moment, no one spoke. Have you ever noticed how children can cut through pretense with a single question? How they can expose the truth we adults spend years trying to hide, even from ourselves? After dinner, the gift opening broke some of the tension. Noah's drone especially was a hit, and soon all 4 teenagers were in the backyard testing it, their excited voices drifting through open windows. Julia and Connor stood at the sink, washing dishes in weighted silence. They're amazing kids, Connor said finally. Smart, kind, resilient. They get that from you, Julia agreed, handing him a plate to dry. The stubbornness is all you, Connor replied with a small smile. Especially Noah. Julia studied him for a moment. Why are you really here, Connor? After 15 years, why now? It's the question we're all wondering, isn't it? What makes a man who abandoned his pregnant wife suddenly reappear 15 years later? Is it genuine remorse or something else entirely? Connor set down the dish towel, meeting her gaze directly. I saw the article about our children, and something broke inside me. All these years, I've been building this empire, thinking success would fill the emptiness I felt. But seeing their faces, seeing you, I realized what I'd thrown away. And now you want it back? Julia's voice held no accusation, just a genuine question. I want a chance, Connor clarified. Not to replace what they have with you that's sacred, and I know it, but to be part of their lives in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Julia stared out the window at their children. Noah, showing the others how to control the drone's more complex functions. They deserve to know their father, she said finally. But Connor, I need to be clear. If you start this, you can't walk away again. They've grown up without you. They've managed. But if you come into their lives now, only to disappear when it gets difficult. I won't, Connor promised, his voice firm with conviction. I've spent 15 years chasing success. I finally understand what really matters. Julia studied him, weighing his sincerity. We'll take it slow, she decided. Weekend visits, maybe a dinner during the week. Let's see how it goes. In the following weeks, Connor restructured his entire life around his newfound family. He delegated more responsibilities at work, scheduled board meetings around school events, and declined business trips that would take him away for too long. His executive assistant, Marissa, watched these changes with curiosity. You're turning down the Seoul conference? That's the biggest tech summit in Asia. Family commitment, Connor replied simply, placing framed photos of 4 teenagers on his desk. Marissa's eyes widened. Since when do you have... It's a long story, Connor said with a smile. 15 years long, actually. Each of the quadruplets connected with Connor differently. Lucas was eager to learn about technology and coding. He bombarded Connor with questions about software development and entrepreneurship. Could you teach me Python? He asked one Saturday morning. I want to build apps like you. Connor spent the weekend creating a makeshift coding lab in Lucas's bedroom, delighted by his son's quick mind and enthusiasm. Noah was more reserved, his trust harder to earn. Connor discovered his passion for soccer and began attending his games, cheering from the sidelines alongside Julia. After a particularly impressive goal, Noah jogged over at halftime. Did you see that? He asked, trying to sound casual. Incredible footwork, Connor replied, beaming with pride. You completely outmaneuvered that defender. A small smile tugged at Noah's lips, the first genuine one directed at Connor. Mia connected through music. When Connor noticed her worn headphones, he purchased top-quality recording equipment for her bedroom. This is professional grade, she gasped, examining the microphone. Musicians use this in actual studios. Your mother mentioned you write songs, Connor explained. I'd love to hear them sometime, if you're comfortable sharing. Mia's smile was hesitant but warm. Maybe when they're ready. Have you ever experienced that moment when someone truly sees your passion, not just acknowledges it, but values it enough to invest in it? That's what Connor was trying to create, with each child, a bridge built on their individual interests, rather than generic paternal gestures. Ava remained the most elusive, quiet, and watchful. She observed Connor's interactions with her siblings, but maintained a careful distance. One evening after the others had gone to bed, Connor found her sketching in the living room. May I? He asked, gesturing to the space beside her on the couch. Ava nodded, continuing her drawing a detailed portrait of her siblings. You have remarkable talent, Connor said softly. Your attention to detail is extraordinary. Mom says I get that from you, Ava replied, not looking up. She says you always notice things others miss. Connor felt a surge of emotion at this unexpected connection. She remembers that about me? Ava finally met his gaze. She remembers everything about you. She kept all your letters. Letters? Connor's brow furrowed. I never sent any letters. Well, undersent any letters. Ava's expression shifted to confusion. But there's a box in her closet with your name on it. The conversation nagged at Connor for days. During their next family dinner, while the children were clearing the table, he quietly asked Julia about it. Ava mentioned letters, he said carefully. From me. But I never. They weren't from you, Julia interrupted, her cheeks flushing. They were to you. Letters I wrote, but never sent. Especially during that first year. Would you let me read them? Julia hesitated, vulnerability flashing across her face. They're private, Connor. I was angry and heartbroken and overwhelmed with 4 newborns. I understand, he nodded, respecting her boundary. I just thought they might help me understand what you went through. Later that evening, as Connor prepared to leave, Julia handed him a small wooden box. Just the first few, she said quietly. The others are too personal. Connor stayed up all night reading Julia's unsent letters, her beautiful handwriting once so familiar, now documenting the hardest year of her life. Dear Connor, the babies came early. 4 perfect tiny humans who each have your eyes. The doctors say they're healthy despite being premature. I named them Noah, Mia, Lucas, and Ava. I wish you could see them. Connor. Lucas smiled today. A real smile. Not just gas. I caught myself reaching for the phone to tell you. Before remembering, You chose not to be part of this. It's 3 a.m. All four are crying at once. I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight in weeks. My mother helps when she can, but she's getting older. I'm so tired I can barely see straight. In my darkest moments, I understand why you left. Tears streamed down Connor's face as he read about Julia's struggles, her triumphs, her loneliness. The next morning, he arrived at her house early, eyes red-rimmed from crying and lack of sleep. Julia opened the door in her bathrobe, surprised to see him. "Connor, it's 6:30 inches the morning." "I read them," he said, voice raw with emotion. "Julia, I had no idea what you went through, what I put you through." "It was a long time ago," she said softly, but her own eyes glistened. "I can never make up for it," Connor continued, "but I want to try. Not just with the kids, but with you too. You deserve so much better." Julia's composure wavered. For the first time since his return, she allowed herself to cry in front of him. Connor hesitantly reached out, and when she didn't pull away, he gently wrapped his arms around her. They stood in the doorway, the morning sun washing over them, as 15 years of pain began, ever so slightly, to heal. Think about the courage it takes to show someone your most vulnerable moments, to let them see the pain they caused you, not as a weapon, but as a bridge to understanding. Would you be brave enough to share your unsent letters with someone who broke your heart? The following weekend, Connor surprised the family with news. "I've purchased the vacant building next to Hope Haven." "That isn't matter," he announced during dinner. 5 pairs of eyes stared at him in confusion. "You mentioned the center needed more space for after-school programs," he explained to Julia. "The building will be donated in the children's names. A trust will cover renovation costs and ongoing maintenance." "That's incredibly generous," Julia replied, clearly stunned. "It's not generosity," Connor corrected gently. "It's responsibility. I've missed 15 years of child support. This doesn't begin to cover it." "We don't need your money," Noah said, a hint of his earlier guardedness returning. "I know you don't," Connor acknowledged. "Your mother has done an amazing job providing for you. This isn't about money. It's about supporting something that matters to all of you." Later, as they toured the empty building, imagining its potential, Lucas nudged Connor's arm. "So, does this mean you're sticking around? Like, permanently?" Connor met Julia's gaze across the room, where she was showing Ava possible spaces for an art studio. Something unspoken passed between them, not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. "If you'll have me," Connor replied, "I'd like nothing more." That night, Connor helped tuck the younger children into bed, a privilege he never thought he'd experience. As he turned to leave Lucas's room, his son called out, "Hey, Connor, I was thinking, would it be okay if I started calling you Dad?" Connor's heart swelled almost painfully. "I would be honored," he managed to say before emotion closed his throat. Outside, in the hallway, he found Julia waiting, having overheard the exchange. "1 down, 3 to go," she said with a small smile. "They're worth waiting for," Connor replied. "All of you are." As summer faded into autumn, Connor settled into a tentative rhythm with his newfound family. Weeknight dinners and weekend outings became the highlight of his existence. Board meetings and quarterly reports, once the central focus of his life, now felt like interruptions to what truly mattered. The renovation of the building next to Hope Haven progressed rapidly. Connor hired the best contractors in the city but insisted that Julia and the children have final say on all design decisions. The project became a family affair, with each quadruplet contributing ideas for the space. "We could add a recording studio for community music lessons," Mia suggested one afternoon as they toured the construction site. "And a proper computer lab," Lucas added enthusiastically, "with 3D printers and VR equipment." Noah wanted a full gymnasium for basketball and indoor soccer, while Ava envisioned a light-filled art studio with north-facing windows. Connor made notes of every request, determined to make their dreams reality. Julia watched these interactions with cautious optimism. "The kids are getting attached to you," she said one morning after they had left for school, "especially Lucas." "Is that a problem?" Connor asked, suddenly concerned. "It could be," Julia replied, meeting his gaze directly. "If this is temporary, if the novelty of playing family man wears off." "This isn't about novelty," Connor interrupted gently. "And my company can function without my physical presence every day." He hesitated, then added, I've been looking at houses in this neighborhood. Julia's eyes widened. You're moving here permanently? If that's okay, Connor said. I want to be close to the kids, to you. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotions. When should we tell the triplets? He asked, practical considerations following emotional connection. Tomorrow, Julia decided. At dinner, they should be the first to know, and their input on the ceremony itself will be important. Have you ever noticed how the biggest life changes often come from the smallest conversations? How a few simple words can alter the entire trajectory of multiple lives? That's what was happening in Julia's kitchen, a quiet revolution disguised as an ordinary discussion. The peace was shattered that afternoon when Connor received an urgent call from Julia. Lucas had been in a fight at school and was suspended for 3 days. Connor rushed to the house to find Lucas sulking on the porch, a bruise darkening on his cheek. What happened? Connor asked, sitting beside his son. Lucas shrugged, refusing to meet his eyes. He won't tell me either, Julia said from the doorway, arms crossed. The principal said Lucas threw the first punch. Connor studied Lucas's posture, defensive, embarrassed, angry. Everyone else gone? Julia nodded. Noah has soccer practice. The girls have choir. Mind if Lucas and I take a drive? Connor asked. Julia hesitated, then agreed. Dinner's at 6. In Connor's car, Lucas maintained his stubborn silence for several minutes as they drove without destination. Fighting isn't like you, Connor observed casually. Must have been something serious. Lucas stared out the window. How would you know what's like me? You've been around for what, 2 months? The accusation stung, but Connor acknowledged its truth. Fair point. I'm still learning who you are. But your mother says you've never been in trouble at school before. Lucas's jaw worked as he struggled with some internal conflict. Finally, he burst out. Ryan Hutchins said you only came back because Mom must have blackmailed you. Said you probably weren't even our real dad, and Mom was just after your money. Connor pulled the car into an empty parking lot and turned to face his son. And you hit him for that? Wouldn't you? Lucas challenged, green eyes so like Connor's own, flashing with indignation. Probably, Connor admitted, surprising Lucas. Not because it was true, but because it was completely false. He turned fully toward Lucas. No one forced me to come back. The minute I learned about you and your siblings, I knew I had to be part of your lives. That's the truth. Then, why did you leave in the first place? Lucas demanded. If we matter so much, the question cut to the heart of everything. Connor took a deep breath. I was young, scared, and incredibly selfish, he began. When your mother told me she was pregnant, all I could think about was how it would affect my goals, my company, my future. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for everyone by walking away. He met Lucas's gaze directly. I was wrong, catastrophically wrong, and I've missed 15 years that I can never get back. Lucas absorbed this, some of his anger deflating. Mom struggled a lot when we were little. She worked 2 jobs. Our grandma had to move in to help. Each word was a knife to Connor's heart. I'm so sorry, Lucas. I can't change the past, but I promise I'm here now. For good. Lucas studied his father's face, looking for deception and finding only regret and determination. I believe you, he said finally, and I'm not sorry I punched Ryan. Connor suppressed a smile. Violence isn't the answer, but standing up for your family, that I understand. He started the car. How about we stop for ice cream before heading home? And maybe we don't mention that part to your mother. Lucas grinned, the first genuine smile he'd directed at Connor. Deal. If you've ever been a parent, you know that moment when discipline meets understanding. When you see yourself in your child's actions, even the misguided ones. Connor was experiencing 15 years of fatherhood compressed into a single conversation, trying to balance guidance with the connection he desperately wanted to build. As autumn deepened into winter, the renovation of the Hope Haven addition neared completion. The project had attracted positive media attention, with several articles highlighting the community impact. One particularly prominent piece featured a photo of Connor with Julia and the quadruplets, captioned, Tech Billionaire Funds Community Center in honor of his children. The morning after its publication, Julia arrived at the construction site visibly upset, newspaper clutched in her hand. Have you seen this? She demanded, thrusting the paper at Connor. I did, he replied carefully. The publicity should help with additional funding. It's not about the article, Julia interrupted. It's about the comments people are making online. They're speculating about us, about our relationship. The children are getting messages from strangers. Connor paled. I never considered how the publicity might affect them. I'm sorry, Julia. Noah came home yesterday asking if we were getting back together. Apparently, his classmates have been teasing him about it. Connor ran a hand through his hair. What did you tell him? Julia's expression softened slightly. I told him that we're figuring things out. That families come in many forms. Are we? Connor asked quietly. Figuring things out? Before Julia could respond, Noah and Mia burst into the room, excitement evident on their faces. Did you see the news? Noah exclaimed. They're calling Dad a philanthropic tech genius. Connor and Julia exchanged glances at Noah's casual use of Dad, a term all four children had gradually adopted over the past months. And my music teacher recognized us from the photo, Mia added. She wants me to compose something for the opening ceremony. Julia's frustration visibly mellowed in the face of her children's enthusiasm. Later, as they walked through the nearly completed building, she murmured to Connor, We should be more careful about media exposure. I want to protect their privacy. Absolutely. Connor agreed. I'll have my PR team redirect attention to the center itself, not our family situation. My PR team. 1111. Julia gave him a sidelong glance. Is that what this is? A family situation? Connor stopped walking. What would you call it? I don't know, Julia admitted, her voice softening. Sometimes it feels like co-parenting. Sometimes it feels like something more. Have you ever had a moment when the words left unspoken say more than those actually voiced? When the space between sentences holds all the possibilities neither person is quite ready to acknowledge? The grand opening of the Hope Haven expansion fell on a crisp December evening. Twinkle lights adorned the entrance, and community members gathered in anticipation. Connor stood to the side, watching Julia direct last-minute preparations with calm efficiency. She caught his eye across the room and smiled a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. Such moments had become more frequent between them, hints of the connection they once shared. The ceremony began with speeches from community leaders and a ribbon cutting by the quadruplets. Connor intentionally stayed in the background, letting the spotlight shine on Julia and the children. This was their triumph, their community. Mia's original composition, a hopeful melody that seemed to capture the journey of the past months, played as guests toured the facility. Ava's murals adorned key walls, bringing color and life to each space. Lucas proudly demonstrated the new computer lab, while Noah organized impromptu basketball games in the gymnasium. As the evening wound down, Connor found Julia alone in the art studio, admiring Ava's centerpiece mural. A tree, with 4 intertwined branches, reaching toward the sky. She has remarkable talent, Connor said softly. Julia nodded. All of them do, in different ways. They get that from their mother, Connor replied, his voice warm with admiration. Julia turned to face him. You've been extraordinary these past months, Connor. The way you've connected with each of them, respected their boundaries, supported their interests, it's more than I ever expected. They make it easy to love them, Connor replied simply. You raised amazing human beings, Julia. She studied him in the soft lighting. You've changed. Having 4 children and their remarkable mother come into my life tends to have that effect, he said with a gentle smile. Julia's eyes glistened. We spent 15 Christmases without you. I know, Connor acknowledged, pain evident in his voice. This will be the first one with you, Julia continued. The children have been planning your gift for weeks. Connor felt emotion tight in his throat. Being included in your lives is the only gift I need. As they stood together in the quiet art studio, something shifted between them. Not dramatically, but subtly. Like a door opening, just a crack, to reveal possibilities neither had acknowledged before. If you've ever rebuilt something that was broken, whether a relationship, trust, or your own sense of purpose, you know what happens in these small, quiet moments. Not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the consistent showing up, in the patient earning of trust, one day at a time. Christmas morning arrived with a blanket of fresh snow. Connor, who had rented a house just 2 blocks from Julia's, arrived early, with arms full of carefully chosen gifts. The living room glowed with soft lights from the tree as the family gathered to exchange presents. When all the children's gifts had been opened, Noah handed Connor a large flat package. "This is from all of us," he said, suddenly shy. "Mom helped, but it was our idea." Connor unwrapped it carefully to reveal a handcrafted wooden frame containing a collage of photographs 15 years of moments he had missed. First steps, first days of school, birthdays, holidays, sports games, music recitals, art shows, and in the center, a recent family portrait of all 6 of them taken at the Hope Haven opening. Across the bottom in careful lettering were the words, "The past we shared without you. The future we'll build together." Connor couldn't speak through his tears. He simply opened his arms, and all 4 teenagers crowded in for a group hug that felt like coming home. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed and Connor was preparing to leave, Alexandra found herself voicing the question that had been on her mind. "Did you really work through every Christmas?" she asked, handing him his coat at the door. Connor looked surprised by the question, then slightly embarrassed. "Most of them, yes. The company always needed attention, and it seemed easier than facing an empty house decorated for a holiday I had no one to share with." The admission was unexpectedly vulnerable, a glimpse of the loneliness that had characterized his life despite his professional success. "That sounds difficult," Julia said, unsure how to respond to this revelation. Connor shrugged slightly, attempting to minimize the impact of his words. "It was a consequence of my choices, nothing more." "Still," Julia persisted, "holidays alone can be challenging, even when they're the result of our own decisions." "They were," Connor acknowledged. "But this year is different. Being included in the triplets' Christmas, it means more than I can express." The correction was subtle but significant, his careful avoidance of presuming inclusion in her celebration, focusing instead on his gratitude for time with their children. "They're excited to have you there," Julia said truthfully. "It's important for them to build holiday memories with both parents." Connor nodded, accepting this framing of his invitation based on the triplets' needs rather than any shift in his relationship with Julia. "Good night, Julia," he said simply, stepping out into the December evening. "Thank you." As Christmas approached, Julia found herself increasingly reflective about the year's extraordinary changes. 12 months ago, she had been a single mother, building her career while raising quadruplets who had never met their father. Now she was navigating a complex co-parenting relationship with the man who had once broken her heart so thoroughly. Life's unexpected turns never ceased to amaze her. Have you ever looked back on a year of your life and marveled at how completely different everything has become? How circumstances you never could have predicted have transformed not just your daily routine, but your entire understanding of what's possible. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, unusual for their region, and greeted with delight by the quadruplets. Connor arrived early, arms laden with carefully wrapped packages that respected the agreed-upon limits, while still reflecting thoughtful consideration of each child's interests. The evening unfolded with a warmth that surprised Julia, the 5 of them preparing dinner together, sharing stories, creating new traditions while honoring established ones. Connor fit into their celebration with unexpected ease, as if he had always been part of their holiday rather than a new addition. After dinner, as they gathered in the living room for the traditional Christmas Eve gift opening, Julia found herself watching Connor's face as the quadruplets selected their packages. His expression held a wonder and gratitude that touched something deep within her, a recognition of how precious this moment was to him, how completely he valued this inclusion in their family ritual. "Dad, this one's for you," Lily said, handing Connor a small, carefully wrapped package. "From all of us." Connor looked genuinely surprised. "For me? I wasn't expecting—" "Of course we got you something," Ethan interrupted with characteristic directness. "You're our dad." The simple statement brought a flash of emotion to Connor's eyes that he quickly blinked away. "Thank you," he said softly, carefully unwrapping the gift to reveal a framed photograph of the quadruplets, taken during their first outing together. "Mom helped us pick the frame," Noah explained. "But the picture was our idea." "It's perfect," Connor said, his voice thick with feeling. "The best gift I could have received." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, his gratitude extending beyond the physical present to what it represented: acceptance, inclusion, family. Later, after the quadruplets had gone to bed with strict instructions not to wake before 7 the next morning, a rule Julia knew would be ignored, she and Connor found themselves alone in the living room, arranging the remaining presents under the tree. "Thank you for today," Connor said quietly, placing a gift with Lily's name on it beside the others. "For including me in your traditions, for helping the quadruplets think of a gift for me. It means more than I can express." "They wanted you here," Julia replied honestly. "And they came up with the photo idea themselves. I just helped with execution." Connor nodded, accepting her deflection of credit. "Still, you could have made this much more difficult. You've been extraordinarily generous, Julia. With the quadruplets, with our co-parenting arrangement, with everything." The gratitude in his voice was sincere, his green eyes so like their children's holding hers with an intensity that made looking away difficult. "It's what's best for them," she said simply, focusing on adjusting a bow rather than meeting his gaze. "Is it only about what's best for them?" Connor asked softly, the question hanging between them like a tangible thing. Julia looked up, caught off guard by the directness of his query. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Connor continued carefully, "that over these past months, something has changed between us. Not just as co-parents, but as people who once meant everything to each other." The observation was accurate, uncomfortably so. Julia had felt the shift herself, had noticed the gradual thawing of her carefully maintained emotional distance, the increasing ease of their interactions, the moments of connection that went beyond mere co-parenting. "Connor," she began, uncertainty clear in her voice. "I don't think—" "I'm not presuming anything," he interrupted gently, "or expecting anything. I want you to know that while I came back into your life hoping only to know my children, I've found myself increasingly grateful for the chance to know you again as well. The woman, you've become brilliant, compassionate, fiercely protective of our children. She's even more remarkable than the woman I married." The compliment caught Julia off guard, its sincerity evident in Connor's expression. This wasn't flattery or manipulation, it was honest appreciation, offered without expectation of reciprocation. "I don't know what to say to that," she admitted, the carefully constructed walls around her heart showing hairline fractures. "You don't need to say anything," Connor assured her. "I just wanted you to know that while I understand the boundaries of our arrangement, I value every moment with you, not just as the mother of my children, but as the extraordinary person you are. Think about that moment when someone who once broke your heart tells you they see you more clearly now than they ever did before. Would you believe them? Could you trust that their appreciation is genuine, not just a strategy to regain what they lost?" "It's late," Julia said finally, retreating to practical matters. "The quadruplets will be up at dawn. Christmas excitement, overriding any sense of reasonable hours." Connor accepted the redirection gracefully. "Of course. What time should I return in the morning?" "You could stay," Julia found herself saying, the offer surprising her as much as it clearly surprised him. "In the guest room," she clarified quickly. "It would be easier than you coming back early, and the quadruplets would love having you here when they wake up." Connor studied her face, perhaps searching for signs of reluctance or obligation in the invitation. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose on your family traditions." "You're part of those traditions now," Julia said simply, "for the quadruplets' sake." The qualification was necessary for her own peace of mind as much as for clarity between them. This wasn't a romantic overture. It was a practical arrangement for their children's happiness. "Then I'd be honored to stay," Connor replied, respecting the boundaries she had established. The next morning brought the controlled chaos of Christmas with excited teenagers. The quadruplets were delighted to find both parents present when they thundered downstairs at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than permitted, but late enough that Julia pretended not to notice the violation. "Mom! Dad! Santa came!" Ethan exclaimed, maintaining the Christmas magic despite being well past the age of literal belief. What followed was a joyful blur of torn wrapping paper, exclamations of delight, and genuine gratitude as the quadruplets opened their gifts. Connor had respected Julia's guidelines, while still selecting thoughtful presents that reflected each child's interests. Advanced robotics components for Noah, a professional-grade telescope for Ethan, a digital drawing tablet for Ava, and high-end music production software for Mia. Julia watched as her children embraced their father in thanks, his expression a mixture of joy and lingering disbelief at his inclusion in this family moment. For all his success, all his wealth and power, this simple Christmas morning clearly represented something more valuable to him than any corporate achievement. "There's one more gift," Connor said as the excitement began to settle. He retrieved a small, elegantly wrapped package from his overnight bag. "For you, Julia?" She hadn't expected this, hadn't thought to get him anything beyond the quadruplets photo. The gesture caught her off guard, creating an imbalance she hadn't anticipated. "Connor, you didn't need to. I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Please." Under the quadruplets' curious gazes, Julia carefully unwrapped the small box, opening it to reveal a delicate silver pendant. Not jewelry in the romantic sense, but something more meaningful. A beautifully crafted heart, anatomically correct rather than stylized, suspended on a simple chain. "It's a surgeon's heart," Connor explained quietly. "Designed by a medical artist who works with my company's healthcare division. I thought it represented, well, both your profession and your essence." The gift was perfect, thoughtful, personal, without being presumptuous, acknowledging her identity as a medical professional while carrying deeper symbolic meaning. "It's beautiful," Julia said sincerely, touched by the consideration behind the selection. "Thank you." "Can I see?" Lily asked, moving closer to examine the pendant. "Oh, it's an actual heart, like the ones Mom works with at the hospital." "Exactly," Connor confirmed, clearly pleased by his daughter's appreciation of the symbolism. "Your mother mends broken hearts every day, both literally in her operating room and figuratively through her care for others." The observation was perceptive, acknowledging dimensions of Julia's work and character that few people recognize so clearly. She found herself unexpectedly moved by his understanding. "Will you wear it today?" Lily asked eagerly. Julia hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course. It's perfect for Christmas." As she fastened the chain around her neck, the pendant resting just below her collarbone, she caught Connor watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something beyond simple pleasure at her acceptance of his gift, something deeper and more complex. Have you ever received a gift that seemed to understand you better than you understood yourself? That recognized not just what you do, but who you are at your core? That's what Connor had given Julia, not just a piece of jewelry, but a symbol of her essence, both professional and personal. The day unfolded with a warmth that surprised Julia. Breakfast in pajamas, video calls with relatives, board games by the fire, and preparations for dinner with Elena and her family. Throughout it all, Connor integrated himself with natural ease, neither overstepping nor holding back, finding his place in their established traditions while adding subtle touches of his own. When Elena arrived with her husband and children, she raised an eyebrow at Connor's comfortable presence in Julia's kitchen, where he was helping prepare the holiday meal. "Well, this is cozy," she observed quietly to Julia, while the others were distracted by the children's excited chatter. "Very domestic." "It's for the quadruplets," Julia replied automatically. "They wanted their father here for Christmas." "Mm-hmm," Elena hummed skeptically. "And the matching aprons? Also for the quadruplets?" Julia glanced down at the festive chef's assistant aprons she and Connor were wearing, a gift from the children years ago that she had absent-mindedly handed to him when he offered to help with dinner. "It's just practical," she insisted, though the image they presented working in tandem in the kitchen, anticipating each other's movements with surprising synchronicity, did suggest a familiarity beyond mere co-parenting. "If you say so," Elena replied, clearly unconvinced. "But from where I'm standing, it looks like something has shifted between you two." Before Julia could formulate a denial, Lily called for her help with setting the dining room table, ending the conversation but not the questions it had raised in her mind. Had something shifted? The careful boundaries she had established when allowing Connor back into their lives, into her life, seemed less defined now, the lines blurring in ways she hadn't anticipated. Dinner was a lively affair, the combined families creating a warm, festive atmosphere. Elena's husband Miguel, who had known Julia since before the quadruplets were born, engaged Connor in conversation about his technology company's medical applications, finding common ground in their shared interest in healthcare innovation. "Your cardiac monitoring system has revolutionized post-operative care," Miguel noted, his admiration professional rather than personal. "We've implemented it at our community clinic with remarkable results." "I'm glad to hear that," Connor replied sincerely. The technology was actually inspired by Julia's research on early intervention in cardiac complications. Her work formed the foundation for our development team's approach. The acknowledgement, his recognition of her influence on his company's innovations, surprised Julia. During their marriage, Connor had certainly respected her intelligence, but there had always been a clear separation between her medical interests and his technological pursuits. "You never mentioned that," she said, genuinely curious. Connor met her gaze across the table, something vulnerable in his expression. "There are many things I should have acknowledged back then, but didn't. Your brilliance was always evident to me, Julia. I just wasn't wise enough to express my admiration properly." The statement hung in the air, loaded with implications that extended beyond professional recognition into the realm of personal regret. Elena, ever perceptive, smoothly redirected the conversation to lighter topics. But the moment lingered in Julia's awareness, another crack in the wall she had built around her heart after Connor's rejection. Have you ever had someone acknowledge a truth about yourself that they failed to recognize when it mattered most? It's a strange feeling, validation that comes too late, yet somehow still matters in ways you didn't expect. Later that evening, after Elena's family had departed and the quadruplets had gone upstairs to enjoy their new gifts, Julia and Connor found themselves alone in the living room, the Christmas tree lights casting a warm glow over the space. "Thank you for today," Connor said quietly, helping her collect empty dessert plates. "For making me part of your Christmas. It's been the most meaningful holiday of my life." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, his gratitude extending beyond mere politeness into genuine emotion. "The quadruplets were happy to have you here," Julia replied, defaulting to her standard explanation for his inclusion. "And you?" Connor asked softly, the question direct, yet gentle. "How was it for you, having me here?" The query caught her off guard, his willingness to ask directly what she had been carefully avoiding, acknowledging even to herself. "It was easier than I expected," she admitted after a moment's hesitation. "Less complicated." "I'm glad," Connor said simply, accepting her measured response without pushing for more. "I've tried to respect the boundaries you've established, to be the co-parent you need me to be without presuming anything beyond that." "You have," Julia acknowledged. "You've been considerate." "But," Connor prompted, sensing the unspoken qualification in her tone. Julia hesitated, uncertain whether to voice the observation that had been forming in her mind throughout the day. "But sometimes," she finally said, "it feels like we're playing roles in a carefully scripted performance. Co-parents who maintain polite distance while raising children together. And other times..." "Other times?" Connor encouraged when she trailed off. "Other times it feels more natural," Julia admitted. "Like today in the kitchen, or watching the quadruplets open their gifts. Moments when we're not just performing co-parenting, but actually connecting." The acknowledgement felt significant, a small but meaningful step toward honesty about the evolving nature of their relationship. "I've felt that too," Connor confessed. "Those moments of connection beyond our defined roles. But I've been careful not to presume they mean more than they do." "What would it mean if they did?" Julia asked, the question emerging before she could reconsider. Connor studied her face, clearly weighing his response carefully. "It would mean that perhaps, over time, we might explore whether there's a path forward that includes more than just co-parenting. Not a return to what we were." The possibility hung between them, neither a declaration nor a proposal, but an acknowledgement of potential, of doors not entirely closed. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Julia said honestly. "The way our marriage ended. The things you said." "I know," Connor replied, regret evident in his expression. "And I would never expect you to simply forget or dismiss that pain. What I did was unforgivable." "Yet here you are," Julia observed, "in my home, wearing a Christmas apron, part of our family celebration." "Here I am," Connor agreed softly, "grateful beyond words for second chances I don't deserve." The humility in his voice, so different from the arrogant certainty of the man she had married, touched something in Julia that she had thought long buried. "People change," she said, echoing Elena's words from months earlier. "Sometimes for the better." "They do," Connor acknowledged, "though proving that change is genuine takes time, consistency, actions rather than words." Yes, Julia agreed. It does. They stood in silence for a moment, the Christmas tree lights twinkling beside them, the day's celebrations creating a foundation of shared experience that neither had anticipated when this journey began. Think about the courage it takes to acknowledge the possibility of reconciliation with someone who once broke your heart. Not rushing back into their arms, but simply opening the door to considering that the person standing before you might truly be different from the one who hurt you so deeply. It's getting late, Connor finally said, respecting the boundaries that still existed despite the evening's candor. I should head home. Julia nodded, walking him to the door where his overnight bag waited. At the threshold, he paused, turning to face her with an expression of genuine gratitude. Thank you again, Julia. For today, for the past months, for allowing me to know our children and to know you again as well. The sincerity in his voice, the absence of entitlement or presumption moved Julia unexpectedly. Merry Christmas, Connor, she said simply, the words carrying more warmth than she had intended. Merry Christmas, Julia, he replied, his smile gentle as he stepped out into the winter evening. As she closed the door behind him, Julia's hand rose unconsciously to touch the silver heart pendant resting against her collarbone, a tangible symbol of the day's unexpected emotional revelations. The new year brought fresh challenges and opportunities. Julia's position at the hospital continued to demand her professional attention, while the quadruplets thrived in school, developing their unique talents with the support of both parents. Connor's company launched a groundbreaking medical technology initiative, with Julia serving as a consultant despite her initial reservations. Their co-parenting relationship settled into a comfortable rhythm, family dinners several times a week, shared responsibility for school events and activities, coordinated schedules that prioritized the quadruplets' needs while respecting each parent's professional commitments. To outside observers, they appeared to be a model of post-divorce cooperation, their interactions characterized by mutual respect and clear communication. But beneath this carefully constructed arrangement, subtle shifts continued, moments of connection that transcended mere co-parenting, glimpses of possibilities neither had openly acknowledged. In late January, as Julia prepared for a major medical conference in Chicago where she would be presenting her latest research, an unexpected complication arose. "Mom, you can't miss my science fair," Ethan protested when she mentioned her upcoming trip. "I'm demonstrating the solar energy converter Dad helped me build. You promised you'd be there." Julia checked her calendar with a sinking feeling, confirming what she already suspected: the science fair coincided exactly with her scheduled presentation. "Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry," she said, genuine regret in her voice. "The conference dates were changed, and I didn't realize the conflict. My presentation is at the exact same time." Ethan's face fell, disappointment evident despite his attempt to hide it. "It's okay," he mumbled unconvincingly. "Dad will be there." "Your project is important," Julia insisted. "Let me see if I can reschedule my presentation or find someone to deliver it for me." "Don't do that," Ethan said quickly. "Your research is important too. I understand." The maturity of his response only increased Julia's guilt. Her children had grown accustomed to the demands of her career, had learned to accept the occasional missed event or rescheduled family time. Usually, she managed to balance professional commitments with parental presence. But sometimes, like now, the conflict seemed irresolvable. Have you ever been torn between two equally important commitments? Felt that no matter which choice you make, you're letting someone down, including yourself? That evening, as Connor joined them for dinner, Julia explained the situation, her frustration evident. "I've tried everything," she concluded. "The conference organizers won't reschedule my presentation, and sending someone else to deliver it would significantly diminish its impact. But I hate missing Ethan's science fair. He's worked so hard on that project. What if we recorded it?" Connor suggested. "I could live stream the entire presentation so you could watch in real time from Chicago, and we'd save the video for you to see again when you return." The solution was practical, thoughtful, exactly the kind of compromise that characterized their co-parenting relationship. "That might work," Julia acknowledged, "though it's not the same as being there in person." "No," Connor agreed. "It isn't. But it shows Ethan that even when you can't be physically present, you're still engaged and supportive." Later, after the quadruplets had gone upstairs to finish homework, Connor lingered in the kitchen, helping Julia clean up from dinner. There's another option we haven't discussed, he said carefully, placing the last dish in the dishwasher. I could present your research at the conference. Julia looked up in surprise. What? I'm familiar with your work, Connor explained. Not at your level of expertise, obviously, but enough to deliver the key points effectively. The technology applications are within my wheelhouse, and I could handle the Q&A by referring specialized medical questions to you via earpiece. The offer was unexpected, a significant commitment of time and effort on Connor's part, requiring him to travel to Chicago and represent her professional work while she remained in San Francisco for Ethan's science fair. That's a generous offer, Julia said, genuinely touched by his willingness to help. But your company can function without me for a few days, Connor finished. Marcus is more than capable of handling things in my absence. This is important to you and to Ethan. Let me do this, Julia. The sincerity in his voice, his genuine desire to support both her career and their son's milestone, moved her deeply. Are you sure? She asked, still hesitant to accept such a significant favor. Completely, Connor assured her. I want to help, not just as Ethan's father, but as someone who cares about what matters to you. The qualification was careful, respectful of the boundaries that still existed between them despite months of evolving connection. Thank you, Julia said finally, genuine gratitude in her voice. That would mean a great deal to me, and to Ethan. Connor nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Then it's settled. Send me your presentation materials, and we'll schedule some time for you to brief me on the key points you want emphasized. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, a compromise that allowed Julia to fulfill her maternal responsibilities while still ensuring her professional work received the attention it deserved. More significantly, it represented a level of support and partnership she hadn't experienced since before their divorce. Over the next week, Julia and Connor spent several evenings reviewing her research presentation, with Julia explaining the medical nuances, and Connor offering suggestions to make the technical aspects more accessible to a mixed audience of physicians and healthcare administrators. Your approach to explaining the cardiac regeneration pathway is brilliant, Connor observed during one of their sessions. But the visual representation could be more intuitive. What if we used this animation sequence instead? He demonstrated an alternative visualization on his tablet, one that maintained scientific accuracy while making the complex process more immediately comprehensible. That's actually better, Julia acknowledged, impressed by his grasp of both the medical concepts and effective communication strategies. Where did you learn to do that? Connor smiled slightly. I've been studying your previous presentations. Your research deserves to be understood by as many people as possible, not just cardiac specialists. The comment, his dedication to representing her work effectively, his respect for her professional contributions, touched Julia unexpectedly. You've changed, she said softly, the observation escaping before she could reconsider. Connor looked up from the tablet, meeting her gaze directly. I hope so, he replied simply. The man I was 15 years ago wouldn't have deserved a second chance with you or the quadruplets. The honesty in his voice, his acknowledgement of past failings without excuse or deflection, reinforced Julia's growing recognition of how fundamentally different this Connor was from the husband who had rejected her so cruelly. If someone had told you a year ago that the person who broke your heart would be the one to step up and support your career in such a meaningful way, would you have believed it? Or would you have dismissed it as an impossible fantasy? The day of Ethan's science fair arrived, coinciding with what would have been Julia's presentation in Chicago. Instead, Connor was in the conference hall, delivering her research with the confidence and clarity they had rehearsed, while Julia stood proudly beside Ethan as he demonstrated his solar energy converter to impress judges and fellow students. Mom, we won first place, Ethan exclaimed later that afternoon, clutching his blue ribbon with undisguised delight. The judges said, our project showed exceptional innovation and practical application. I'm so proud of you, Julia replied, embracing her son warmly. Your hard work really paid off. Dad helped a lot, Ethan acknowledged generously, but the core design was mine. Do you think we can call him now to tell him about the ribbon? Of course, Julia agreed, checking her watch and calculating the time difference. His presentation should be finished by now. When Connor answered the video call, his face lighting up at the sight of Ethan's excited expression, Julia felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected co-parenting partnership that allowed both of them to support their children's achievements. "First place!" Connor exclaimed when Ethan proudly displayed his ribbon. "That's fantastic! I knew your design modifications would impress the judges." "How did Mom's presentation go?" Ethan asked, his generosity of spirit extending to interest in his Father's Day despite his own excitement. "Very well," Connor replied, shifting the camera to show the conference hall behind him. "Standing room only. And excellent questions afterward. Several research hospitals have already expressed interest in implementing your mother's technique." The pride in his voice, genuine enthusiasm for Julia's professional success, was unmistakable. "Thank you for doing this," Julia said when Ethan had run off to share his news with his siblings. "For representing my work so effectively." "It was my honor," Connor replied sincerely. "Your research is groundbreaking, Julia. It deserves recognition." The conversation continued briefly, with Connor sharing details about the conference reception and Julia updating him on the science fair results. As they prepared to end the call, Connor hesitated, then added, "I fly back tomorrow evening. Would it be all right if I stopped by afterward? I brought something for Ethan to celebrate his project, and I'd like to give you a more detailed report on the conference feedback." "Of course," Julia agreed readily. "We'll have dinner waiting. The quadruplets will want to hear all about Chicago." After ending the call, Julia found herself reflecting on the ease of their interaction, the natural coordination of parental and professional support, the genuine mutual respect that had developed between them. It was so different from the competitive dynamic that had sometimes characterized their marriage when her medical aspirations had taken a back seat to his corporate ambitions. The following evening, as promised, Connor arrived, bearing gifts not just for Ethan, but for all 4 quadruplets. A specialized engineering kit for Ethan to expand his solar project, advanced robotics components for Noah, a professional-grade digital art tablet for Ava, high-quality music production software for Mia. "You didn't need to bring something for everyone," Julia observed, as the children excitedly examined their presents. "I wanted to," Connor replied simply. Noah, Ava, and Mia were incredibly supportive of Ethan's project, helping him prepare his presentation and practice his demonstration. That deserves recognition too. The thoughtfulness of his gesture, his recognition of all 4 children's contributions, rather than focusing solely on Ethan's achievement, impressed Julia. This wasn't about buying affection with expensive gifts. It was about acknowledging each child's unique value and contributions to their family dynamic. After dinner, as the quadruplets disappeared upstairs to explore their new gifts, Connor and Julia settled in the living room with coffee, discussing the conference in greater detail. "Your presentation was extremely well received," Connor explained, showing her the feedback forms he had collected. "Dr. Chen from Mayo Clinic was particularly interested in implementing your technique for pediatric cases." "That's wonderful," Julia replied, genuinely pleased by the professional recognition. "Thank you again for representing my work so effectively." "It was the least I could do," Connor said, setting aside the conference materials. "Seeing Ethan's face when you told me about his first-place ribbon, that moment of pure joy and pride, it was worth every minute of preparation and travel." The sincerity in his voice touched Julia deeply. This wasn't the Connor who had once prioritized corporate success above all else. This was a man who genuinely valued his children's achievements and her professional contributions equally. "You've become an excellent father," she observed quietly. "The quadruplets are fortunate to have you in their lives." Connor looked momentarily surprised by the compliment, then deeply moved. "That means more coming from you than from anyone else," he admitted. "You've been their rock, their constant, their everything for 15 years. Your approval of my role in their lives, it matters tremendously." The vulnerability in his expression, his willingness to acknowledge how much her opinion meant to him, created a moment of genuine connection between them, transcending their carefully maintained co-parenting boundaries. "I should go," Connor said finally, setting down his coffee cup. "It's been a long day of travel and you probably have an early surgery tomorrow." "Actually," Julia replied, "I took tomorrow off. After missing so much preparation time for the conference, I wanted a day with the quadruplets before diving back into hospital responsibilities." "That's wonderful," Connor said sincerely. "They'll appreciate the time with you." As he prepared to leave, gathering his coat and briefcase, Connor hesitated at the door. "Julia, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Something personal." The qualification immediately heightened her awareness, shifting the conversation from comfortable co-parenting territory into something more uncertain. "What is it?" she asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. "The hospital's spring benefit is next month," Connor began, his usual confidence temporarily muted. "Tech Fusion is a major sponsor, as you know. I was wondering if you might consider attending with me, not as co-parents or colleagues, but as my date. Have you ever had a moment when a simple question changes everything? When words hanging in the air between two people suddenly transform the entire landscape of possibility? The request hung between them, explicit in its departure from their established parameters, yet carefully phrased to allow for graceful refusal. "Connor," Julia began, uncertainty evident in her voice. "I'm not sure that's—" "You don't need to answer now," he interrupted gently. "And if the answer is no, I completely understand. Our co-parenting relationship is too important to jeopardize. I wanted you to know that my feelings for you have evolved beyond respect and gratitude. If there's any possibility that you might someday feel the same, I'd like the chance to explore that. At your pace, on your terms." The directness of his statement, his willingness to acknowledge developing feelings while respecting her boundaries, caught Julia off guard. This wasn't the entitled presumption of the Connor she had married, but neither was it the careful distance of mere co-parenting. "I need time to think about this," she said finally, the honesty of her response matching his. "It's complicated." "Of course," Connor agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need. Whatever your decision, nothing changes about our arrangement with the quadruplets." The assurance was important, his recognition that their children's stability took precedence over any potential romantic reconnection. "Thank you," Julia said simply. "Good night, Connor." After he left, she remained by the window, watching as he walked to his car parked at the curb. The invitation replayed in her mind, along with all its implications. A date. Not co-parenting, not professional collaboration, but an explicit step toward rekindling something personal between them. The possibility both intrigued and terrified her. Connor had changed, that much was undeniable. The man who had supported Ethan's science project while representing her research in Chicago was fundamentally different from the husband who had discarded her for being barren 15 years ago. But could she trust that change? Could she risk her heart again with the one person who had shattered it so completely? If you've ever stood at the crossroads of forgiveness and self-protection, you understand Julia's dilemma. Is it braver to open yourself to the possibility of being hurt again, or to maintain the walls that have kept you safe for so long? These questions lingered as Julia made her way upstairs, checking on each of the quadruplets before retiring to her own room. Noah was already asleep, his new robotics components carefully arranged on his desk for tomorrow's exploration. Ethan was still awake, making notes about potential improvements to his solar converter. Ava sat cross-legged on her bed, already creating digital art on the tablet Connor had given her. Mia was experimenting with her new music software, headphones on, completely absorbed in composition. "That's beautiful," Julia observed, pausing in Ava's doorway to admire the landscape taking shape on the screen. Ava looked up with a smile. "It's the view from Dad's office. He took us there last weekend, remember? I wanted to capture it while it was still fresh in my mind." The casual reference to Dad, the natural integration of Connor into their lives and memories, struck Julia powerfully. In just months, he had become an essential part of their family narrative. His presence no longer extraordinary, but expected, valued, normal. "You like having him in our lives, don't you?" Julia asked softly, sitting on the edge of Ava's bed. Ava nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It was weird at first, but now it feels right. Somehow, like our family was missing a piece. And now, it's complete." The observation, delivered with a child's straightforward perception, resonated more deeply than Julia had anticipated. "He's changed a lot since you knew him before, hasn't he?" Ava continued, her perceptiveness sometimes startling for a 15-year-old. "Dad, I mean, from how he was when you were married." Julia hesitated, surprised by the direct question. "Yes," she acknowledged finally. "He has changed, quite significantly." "That's what he said," Ava remarked, returning her attention to her artwork. "That he wasn't a very good husband, but he's trying to be a good father." and that you're helping him learn how, even though you didn't have to. The comment, Connor's honest assessment of his past failings and gratitude for Julia's current generosity, touched something deep within her. There was no manipulation here. No attempt to use the children to influence her perception. Just honest acknowledgement of growth and appreciation. "Your father loves you very much," Julia said simply. "All four of you." "I know," Ava replied. Then, with the directness that sometimes took Julia's breath away, "And I think he still loves you too. Not that it's any of my business." Before Julia could formulate a response to this startling observation, Ava yawned dramatically. "I'm super tired, Mom. Good night." The transparent attempt to end a conversation that had ventured into uncomfortable territory made Julia smile despite her surprise. "Good night, sweetheart. Don't stay up too late with that tablet." As she prepared for bed, Julia found her thoughts returning to Connor's invitation and Ava's perceptive comment. Did Connor still love her? Did she still have feelings for him, buried beneath layers of hurt and self-protection? The questions had no simple answers. What existed between them now was complex respect, gratitude, co-parenting partnership, and something else. Something undefined that seemed to be growing despite her careful boundaries. The spring benefit was weeks away. She had time to consider her response, to examine her own feelings without pressure or expectation. For now, that would have to be enough. Think about the courage it takes to consider opening your heart again after it's been broken. To weigh the risk of pain against the possibility of joy. To trust not just another person, but your own judgment after it's failed you before. The following days brought a return to normal routines, hospital responsibilities, school activities, family dinners. Connor maintained his regular presence in the quadruplets' lives while respecting Julia's need for space to consider his invitation. Their interactions remained comfortable, focused on co-parenting rather than personal possibilities. A week after his return from Chicago, as Julia performed a particularly challenging cardiac procedure, an unexpected complication arose, the patient's blood pressure dropping dangerously despite all standard interventions. "We need to try something else," she told her surgical team, her mind racing through alternatives. "The standard protocol isn't working." In that critical moment, Julia remembered an experimental technique Connor had mentioned during their presentation preparations, a modification to her own procedure that his company's research division had been developing but hadn't yet published. "Prepare for a modified approach," she instructed, explaining the technique to her surprised but trusting team. The intervention worked, stabilizing the patient and allowing Julia to complete the surgery successfully. Later, reviewing the case with her residents, she explained the theoretical basis for the modification. "That's brilliant," Dr. Chen, her most promising resident, observed. "Where did you learn that technique? It's not in any of the literature we've reviewed." "It's experimental," Julia explained. "Being developed by TechFusion's medical division. Their CEO mentioned it during a recent discussion." "Connor Hamilton," another resident clarified. "Isn't he your ex-husband? The quadruplets' father?" The question was asked without malice, simply curiosity about the professional connection. But it highlighted the increasingly blurred boundaries between Julia's personal and professional relationships with Connor. "Yes," she acknowledged. "We've been consulting on several medical technology applications recently." The explanation was accurate if incomplete. What she didn't mention was how naturally they had fallen into collaborative discussions during their presentation preparations. How Connor had shared his company's research openly, trusting her expertise and judgment. That evening, Julia called Connor to inform him about the surgical application of his company's experimental technique. "The modification worked perfectly," she explained. "The patient is stable and recovering well. Your research team's approach has significant potential for cases where standard protocols fail." "That's wonderful news," Connor replied, genuine enthusiasm in his voice. "I'll let the development team know immediately. They'll be thrilled to hear about the successful clinical application." "I hope that's all right," Julia added belatedly. "Using an unpublished technique. I should have asked permission first, but in the moment." "Julia," Connor interrupted gently, "you never need permission to use anything that might save a patient's life. That's the whole point of our research, to provide tools for brilliant surgeons like you to apply when needed." The generosity of his response, his immediate prioritization of patient welfare over corporate protocols or publication priorities, reinforced Julia's growing recognition of how fundamentally Connor had changed from the ambitious, sometimes ruthless businessman she had married. "Thank you," she said simply. For understanding. Always, Connor replied. The word carrying weight beyond this specific situation. After a moment's hesitation, Julia added, about the spring benefit, I've been thinking about your invitation. You don't need to decide yet, Connor assured her quickly. There's plenty of time. I know, Julia acknowledged, but I've made my decision. I'd like to attend with you. As your date. The silence that followed suggested her answer had caught Connor by surprise. Perhaps he had prepared himself for rejection rather than acceptance. Are you sure? He finally asked, his voice carefully controlled. I don't want you to feel any pressure or obligation. I'm sure, Julia confirmed. It's just one evening, Connor. A chance to explore whether there might be something worth rebuilding between us, beyond co-parenting. That's wonderful, Connor replied, genuine emotion evident in his voice. Thank you, Julia, for being willing to consider the possibility. The conversation concluded shortly afterward, both of them retreating to safer topics, the quadruplets' activities, upcoming school events, logistical co-parenting details. But something had shifted. A door opened that had previously remained firmly closed. Have you ever taken a step that terrified you? Not because you were certain it was right, but because you knew you'd always wonder what if you didn't try. That's where Julia stood at the threshold of possibility, uncertain but willing to explore what might lie beyond. As Julia prepared for bed that night, she found herself reflecting on the decision she had made. Accepting Connor's invitation represented more than just a date to a hospital benefit. It signified willingness to consider a future that included him not just as her children's father, but potentially as something more. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Connor had hurt her deeply once before. Could she trust that his transformation was genuine and lasting? Could she risk her heart again with the one person who had shattered it so completely? The answer wasn't simple. But as Julia drifted toward sleep, she realized that perhaps the greater risk would be refusing to acknowledge the possibility of redemption, of growth, of second chances, the very thing she had witnessed in Connor over the past months. The weeks leading up to the spring benefit brought a subtle shift in Julia and Connor's interactions. Nothing dramatic or inappropriate, they remained focused on co-parenting, on the quadruplets' needs and activities. But there was a new awareness between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that they were cautiously exploring territory beyond their established boundaries. Connor continued to join them for family dinners, to attend school functions, to participate fully in the quadruplets' lives. But Julia noticed small changes, his gaze lingering on her a moment longer than necessary, his hand occasionally brushing hers when passing dishes at dinner, his attention to her preferences and comfort more pronounced than before. For her part, Julia found herself increasingly aware of Connor, not just as her children's father or her professional colleague, but as a man, one who had hurt her deeply. Yes, but also one who seemed genuinely determined to be better than his past mistakes. The quadruplets, perceptive as always, noticed the subtle shift in dynamic. Are you and Dad dating? Ethan asked bluntly one evening after Connor had left following dinner. Julia nearly choked on her tea. What makes you ask that? You laugh at his jokes now, Ethan observed matter-of-factly. Even the really bad ones, and he keeps looking at you when he thinks no one's watching. We're exploring the possibility of a friendship beyond co-parenting, Julia replied carefully, not wanting to create expectations the quadruplets might later be disappointed by. Your father and I have a complicated history, but we're trying to move forward in a positive way. I think it's nice, Ava offered, her expression thoughtful. You both seem happier when you're together now, not like at the beginning when it was all awkward and tense. Noah, typically more reserved about emotional matters, simply asked, Does this mean Dad might move in someday? No, Julia answered quickly, perhaps too quickly. We're nowhere near that kind of decision. We're just getting to know each other again, as the people we are now rather than who we were 15 years ago. The quadruplets seemed satisfied with this explanation, though Julia caught them exchanging meaningful glances, their silent communication, suggesting they had their own thoughts on the matter. If you've ever tried to explain a complex adult relationship to children, you know the delicate balance Julia was attempting, being honest without oversharing, acknowledging possibilities without creating expectations, respecting their interest while maintaining appropriate boundaries. The evening of the spring benefit arrived with unexpected nervousness on Julia's part. She had attended countless professional events over the years, had even encountered Connor at several since his return to their lives. But this was different, explicitly designated as a date, rather than co-parenting or professional collaboration. As she prepared, selecting a deep emerald gown that complemented her fair coloring, Julia found herself paying more attention to details than she typically would for a hospital function. The elegant updo that showcased the silver heart pendant Connor had given her at Christmas. The subtle makeup that enhanced her features without appearing overdone. The delicate perfume she rarely wore but had always loved. When Connor arrived to pick her up, his appreciative gaze as she descended the stairs confirmed that her efforts had not gone unnoticed. "You look stunning," he said simply. The sincerity in his voice unmistakable. "Thank you," Julia replied, accepting the compliment without deflection. "You clean up well yourself." Connor did indeed look handsome in his tailored tuxedo, the formal attire highlighting his athletic build and distinguished features. The silver at his temples, which had first appeared during his cardiac recovery, added a distinguished quality that suited him. The quadruplets, gathered in the living room to see them off, watched this exchange with varying degrees of interest and speculation. "You both look awesome," Ethan declared with characteristic enthusiasm. "Like movie stars or something." "Very elegant," Noah agreed. More reserved, but equally appreciative. Ava simply smiled, her expression suggesting she understood more about the evening's significance than her brothers. After assuring the quadruplets that Elena would be arriving shortly to stay with them, and extracting promises of good behavior, Julia and Connor departed for the benefit. In the car, a moment of unexpected awkwardness descended, the reality of their first official date in 15 years suddenly apparent. "Nervous?" Connor asked perceptively, breaking the silence. "A little," Julia admitted, appreciating his directness. "This feels significant." "It does," Connor agreed. "But there's no pressure, Julia. No expectations. Just an evening together, seeing if there's something worth exploring beyond co-parenting." The reassurance helped ease her tension, his respect for her boundaries evident even in this moment of transition. The benefit itself was exactly as Julia had expected, elegant, crowded with the city's elite, focused on fundraising for the hospital's various initiatives. As the director of the cardiac surgery department, she was frequently approached by donors and colleagues, all eager to discuss the innovative work being done under her leadership. What differed from previous events was Connor's presence not as a separate entity, the CEO of a major donor corporation, but as her companion for the evening. He remained attentive without being possessive, supportive without overshadowing her professional identity, charming without drawing attention away from the hospital's mission. "Dr. Parker's cardiac center has revolutionized treatment protocols across the West Coast," he told an interested donor, pride evident in his voice. "The mortality rates for previously high-risk procedures have decreased by nearly 30% under her leadership." Julia found herself unexpectedly touched by his genuine admiration, so different from the competitive dynamic that had sometimes characterized their marriage, when her medical aspirations had taken a back seat to his corporate ambitions. During a brief lull in the socializing, as they stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, Connor turned to her with an expression of sincere appreciation. "Thank you for agreeing to come with me tonight," he said quietly. "I know it wasn't an easy decision." "It wasn't," Julia acknowledged honestly. "But I'm glad I made it." "So am I," Connor replied, his smile warm but restrained. "Would you like to dance? The orchestra is quite good." The invitation represented another step beyond their established boundaries, from professional colleagues to dance partners, from co-parents to potential romantic reconnection. After a moment's hesitation, Julia nodded. "I'd like that." On the dance floor, Connor's hand rested lightly at her waist, maintaining a respectful distance while still creating a sense of connection. They moved together with surprising ease, muscle memory from years past guiding their steps despite the intervening decade of separation. "We always did dance well together," Connor observed softly. "Even at our first charity gala, when I had 2 left feet and you patiently taught me the basic waltz." The memory from the early days of their relationship, when they had been young and in love, before ambition and disappointment had driven them apart, brought an unexpected smile to Julia's lips. "You stepped on my toes 3 times, she recalled, "and apologized so profusely that the hospital director thought you'd committed some terrible faux pas." Connor laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I was terrified of embarrassing you. You were this brilliant medical student, and I was just a tech entrepreneur with more ideas than social graces. You've come a long way since then, Julia observed, noting the ease with which he now navigated these elite social circles. In some ways, Connor acknowledged, though I'd trade all the social polish and business success for the chance to have made different choices 15 years ago. The statement hung between them not an explicit apology, which he had offered many times since his return, but a deeper acknowledgement of regret, of recognition that success had come at too high a personal cost. Have you ever wondered what your life might have been if you'd made different choices at critical moments? If you'd chosen connection over ambition, relationship over achievement? That's the reflection Connor was sharing, not just regret, but a fundamental reassessment of what truly matters. We can't change the past, Julia said finally, only learn from it. Wise as always, Connor replied, his expression softening as he gazed at her. That's one of the many things I've always admired about you, Julia, your ability to move forward, to build something meaningful from difficult circumstances. The compliment was sincere, acknowledging her strength without minimizing the challenges she had faced, many of which he had created through his rejection. As the dance ended, Connor's hand lingered briefly at her waist before he stepped back, respecting the boundaries that still existed despite the evening's warmth. Would you like some air? He suggested. The terrace is usually quieter than the main ballroom. Julia nodded, following him through the French doors onto the elegant terrace overlooking the city. The spring night was mild, stars visible above the urban glow, the distant sound of the orchestra creating a romantic backdrop to their conversation. I've been thinking a lot about second chances, Connor said after a comfortable silence, about whether some mistakes are too significant to overcome, no matter how genuine the remorse or how determined the effort to make amends. The philosophical turn surprised Julia, though the underlying question was one she had been considering herself since his return to their lives. What conclusion have you reached? She asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Connor considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. That redemption is possible, but not guaranteed. That it requires not just remorse, but sustained action, consistent evidence of change over time. And most importantly, that it depends on the willingness of the person who is hurt to consider the possibility of forgiveness. The insight was profound, his recognition that his transformation, however genuine, did not entitle him to Julia's forgiveness or trust. And if that willingness isn't there, she asked softly, if the hurt runs too deep, then you accept that reality with grace. Connor replied, without hesitation. You continue to be the best co-parent possible, to support the other person's happiness, even if you can't be part of it in the way you might hope. The answer impressed Julia with its maturity and selflessness so different from the entitled expectations of the man she had married. You really have changed, she observed, the words escaping before she could reconsider. Connor met her gaze directly, vulnerability evident in his expression. I hope so. The man I was 15 years ago wouldn't deserve a second chance with you or the quadruplets. The honesty in his voice, his acknowledgement of past failings without excuse or deflection moved Julia unexpectedly. The quadruplets asked if we were dating, she admitted, changing the subject slightly. After you left the other night. Connor's eyebrows rose in surprise. What did you tell them? That we're exploring the possibility of a friendship beyond co-parenting, Julia replied. That we have a complicated history, but we're trying to move forward in a positive way. A diplomatic answer, Connor observed with a small smile. And an accurate one, I think. Noah asked if you might move in someday, Julia added, watching his reaction carefully. Connor looked momentarily startled, then thoughtful. That's quite a leap from one date. That's what I told them, Julia agreed. That we're nowhere near that kind of decision. But not that it's impossible, Connor noted perceptively. Just premature. Julia hadn't considered the implication of her phrasing until he pointed it out. She had indeed left the door open to possibilities, however distant they might be. I suppose I did, she acknowledged, though I'm not sure what that means yet. It means you're willing to consider possibilities, Connor said gently. That's more than I dared hope for when I asked you to this benefit. Think about the courage it takes to acknowledge even the possibility of reconciliation with someone who once broke your heart. Not rushing back into their arms, but simply opening the door to considering that the person standing before you might truly be different from the one who hurt you so deeply. The conversation paused, as a waiter approached with champagne, offering them flutes from a silver tray. They accepted gratefully, the momentary interruption providing space to process the unexpected depth of their exchange. When they were alone again, Connor raised his glass slightly. "To possibilities," he suggested, his tone warm, but not presumptuous. "To possibilities," Julia echoed, touching her glass to his. The remainder of the evening unfolded with surprising ease, conversations with colleagues and donors, a second dance that felt even more natural than the first, shared observations about the event and its participants. By the time they departed, Julia found herself genuinely relaxed in Connor's company, the initial nervousness replaced by comfortable familiarity. The drive home was filled with easy conversation, reflections on the benefit, updates on hospital initiatives, amusing observations about some of the more eccentric donors. It felt natural. Unforced two people who knew each other well, enjoying each other's company without pressure or expectation. At her door, another moment of potential awkwardness arose, the traditional end-of-date scenario that hadn't applied to them in 15 years. "I had a wonderful evening," Connor said simply, maintaining a respectful distance on the porch. "Thank you for giving me the chance to escort you." "I enjoyed it too," Julia replied honestly. "More than I expected to." Connor smiled at her candor. High praise indeed. A brief silence fell between them, laden with unspoken questions about next steps, about where this evening might lead. "Would you like to have dinner next weekend?" Connor asked finally. "Just the two of us. Not a work function or family meal. Perhaps that Italian restaurant in North Beach you always liked." The invitation represented another step forward from a single date at a professional event to an explicitly romantic dinner, from tentative exploration to more deliberate connection. Julia considered the request, weighing her growing comfort with Connor against her lingering caution about moving too quickly. "I'd like that," she decided, the answer surprising her almost as much as it clearly pleased him. "Wonderful," Connor replied, his smile warm but restrained. "I'll make reservations for Saturday, if that works with your schedule." "Saturday is perfect," Julia confirmed. Elena already offered to stay with the quadruplets. "I think she's more invested in our reconnection than she admits." Connor laughed softly. "Elena has always had your best interests at heart. I'm grateful she's supporting whatever this is becoming." The acknowledgement, whatever this is becoming, was carefully phrased, neither presuming too much nor minimizing the significance of their evolving relationship. "Good night, Connor," Julia said, her hand resting briefly on the doorknob. "Good night, Julia," he replied, his gaze holding hers for a moment, before he stepped back, respecting the boundaries that still existed despite the evening's warmth. As she entered the house, finding Elena reading on the couch while the quadruplets slept upstairs, Julia felt a sense of cautious optimism she hadn't expected when accepting Connor's invitation to the benefit. "Well?" Elena prompted, setting aside her book. "How was the date?" "It was nice," Julia admitted, slipping off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Better than I anticipated." "Just nice?" Elena pressed, clearly hoping for more details. Julia smiled at her friend's transparent curiosity. "Comfortable. Natural. As if we've known each other for years, which I suppose we have, despite the intervening decade." "And?" Elena encouraged, when Julia didn't elaborate further. "And we're having dinner next Saturday," Julia concluded. "Just the two of us. At Billionaire. The restaurant where he proposed to you the first time?" Elena's eyebrows rose significantly. "That's meaningful." Julia hadn't made the connection, but Elena was right. Billionaire had been the site of Connor's proposal 15 years earlier, a romantic dinner that had ended with a ring and promises of forever. "I'm sure it's just a coincidence," she said, though uncertainty colored her tone. "He knows I like their pasta." "Mm-hmm," Elena hummed skeptically. "Just like it's a coincidence that you wore the pendant he gave you for Christmas, and the perfume he always said reminded him of the day you met." Julia's hand rose unconsciously to touch the silver heart resting against her collarbone. "You're reading too much into this. We're just exploring possibilities." "If you say so," Elena replied, clearly unconvinced. "But from where I'm standing, it looks like something significant is developing between you two. Something beyond co-parenting or friendship." The observation wasn't inaccurate. Julia had felt it herself throughout the evening moments of connection that transcended their defined roles. Glimpses of what might be possible if they continued along this path. "It's complicated," she said finally. "There's history between us, good and bad, and the quadruplets to consider." "Life usually is complicated," Elena observed, echoing her words from months earlier. "Especially the parts worth having." As Julia prepared for bed that night, she found herself reflecting on the evening's revelations. Connor had changed that much was undeniable. The man who had escorted her to the benefit, who had spoken so thoughtfully about redemption and second chances, was fundamentally different from the husband who had discarded her for being barren 15 years ago. But was that change enough to risk her heart again? To consider rebuilding something with the one person who had hurt her most deeply? The answer wasn't clear. But for the first time since Connor's return to their lives, Julia found herself genuinely open to the possibility not just for the quadruplets' sake, but for her own. If you've ever stood at the threshold of forgiveness, you know the courage it takes to even consider opening that door. Not rushing through it, but simply acknowledging that what lies beyond might be worth exploring despite the risk of being hurt again. The dinner at Bellinotte the following Saturday deepened this openness. Away from professional contexts or family responsibilities, Julia and Connor rediscovered aspects of their connection that had been overshadowed by their complicated history, shared interests, complementary perspectives, the easy conversation that had initially drawn them together at medical school years ago. "I've missed this," Connor admitted as they lingered over dessert, the restaurant's intimate atmosphere encouraging candor. "Not just being with you, but being with someone who truly knows me, the good and the bad, the strengths and the flaws." "I'm not sure I do know you anymore," Julia replied thoughtfully. "The Connor I married was brilliant and ambitious, but also driven by external validation, by the need to prove himself through achievement. The man sitting across from me now seems different, more grounded, more aware of what truly matters." Connor nodded, accepting her assessment without defensiveness. "Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities," he said with a small smile. "But it wasn't just the heart attack. Therapy has helped me understand why I made the choices I did. How my father's abandonment created this desperate need to build something permanent. Something that couldn't be taken away." "You've never talked about your father before," Julia observed, surprised by this glimpse into his psychological journey. "Not even during our marriage. I didn't understand the connection myself back then," Connor admitted. "How his leaving when I was 8 shaped my definition of success, my fear of vulnerability, my belief that worth came from achievement rather than connection. The insight was profound, a level of self-awareness the old Connor had never demonstrated. Julia found herself genuinely moved by his willingness to examine his past actions with such honesty. "That doesn't excuse what I did to you," Connor continued, meeting her gaze directly. "Understanding the root of a behavior doesn't justify the pain it causes others, but it has helped me recognize patterns so I don't repeat them." "That's significant," Julia acknowledged. "Self-awareness is the foundation of genuine change." "My therapist would agree with you," Connor said with a small smile. "She's been instrumental in helping me see how my fear of abandonment led me to abandon you first, a preemptive strike against potential loss." The observation was startlingly perceptive, a psychological insight into their divorce that Julia herself had never fully articulated. "Is that what you think happened?" she asked, genuinely curious about his perspective on their past. Connor considered the question carefully. "I think when the doctors said you couldn't have children, it triggered my deepest fears of impermanence, of having nothing to leave behind, of being forgotten. Instead of supporting you through that diagnosis, I retreated into self-protection. I convinced myself that leaving was the rational choice, when in reality, I was running from vulnerability and potential heartbreak." The analysis was remarkably honest, his willingness to acknowledge the emotional cowardice behind his seemingly calculated decision. "And now?" Julia asked softly. "What's different now?" "Everything," Connor replied without hesitation. "I understand that legacy isn't about corporate achievements or biological heirs, but about the impact we have on the people in our lives. I've learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, but courage. And most importantly, I've recognized that no amount of professional success compensates for the absence of genuine connection." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, his green eyes so like their children's holding hers, with an intensity that made looking away difficult. "That's quite a transformation," Julia observed, both impressed and cautious. "But how can you be sure it will last? That under pressure, you wouldn't revert to old patterns?" It's the question we all face when someone claims to have changed, isn't it? How do we know the transformation is genuine and lasting, not just a temporary adjustment that will revert when circumstances change? "I can't offer guarantees," Connor acknowledged honestly, "only evidence over time. The past 8 months have brought significant challenges adjusting to co-parenting, rebuilding a relationship with children who were strangers, balancing corporate responsibilities with family commitments. Through all of it, my priorities have remained clear. The quadruplets come first, always. Quote, dot. The answer was thoughtful rather than defensive. His recognition that trust had to be earned through consistent action, not promised through words alone. "And where do I fit in those priorities?" Julia asked, the question emerging before she could reconsider. Connor's expression softened. "Wherever you choose to be, Julia. As co-parent, as friend, as something more. That's entirely your decision. And one I'll respect whatever the outcome." The response impressed her with its lack of entitlement or presumption, his acknowledgement that her trust was a gift to be earned, not a right to be claimed. As dinner concluded, and they walked along the waterfront afterward, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, memories of their early days together at medical school, amusing stories about the quadruplets' latest adventures, shared observations about the city compared to their previous home. It felt natural, this rediscovery of connection beyond co-parenting or professional collaboration. By the time Connor drove her home, Julia found herself genuinely relaxed in his company, the initial caution giving way to comfortable familiarity. At her door, another moment of potential awkwardness arose, the traditional end-of-date scenario that hadn't applied to them in 15 years. "I had a wonderful evening," Connor said simply, maintaining a respectful distance on the porch. "Thank you for giving me the chance to reconnect with you, not just as the quadruplets' mother, but as the remarkable woman you are." "I enjoyed it too," Julia replied honestly. "It was illuminating. Seeing who you've become, understanding more about why things happened as they did." Connor nodded, accepting this measured response without pushing for more. "May I call you tomorrow? Perhaps we could take the quadruplets to the Science Museum this weekend, all of us together." The suggestion was carefully balanced, a step forward in their personal reconnection while maintaining the focus on family activities, respecting Julia's pace without retreating entirely to co-parenting territory. "I'd like that," she agreed. "The quadruplets have been asking to see the new space exhibition." A brief silence fell between them, laden with unspoken questions about next steps, about where these evenings might lead. "Good night, Julia," Connor said finally, his gaze holding hers for a moment before he stepped back, respecting the boundaries that still existed despite their growing connection. "Good night, Connor," she replied, a small smile touching her lips as she entered the house. Have you noticed how the most significant journeys often progress in these small, measured steps? Not in dramatic leaps or grand gestures, but in quiet moments of growing trust. In the gradual lowering of walls built for protection, the following weeks brought a gradual evolution in their relationship. Additional dinners, just the two of them, family outings with the quadruplets, quiet evenings of conversation after the children had gone to bed, nothing rushed or dramatic, but a steady deepening of connection, a careful exploration of possibilities beyond co-parenting. The quadruplets observed this development with varying degrees of interest and approval. "Are you and Dad together now?" Noah asked one evening after Connor had left following dinner. "Like, officially?" Julia considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest without creating expectations that might later lead to disappointment. "We're spending time together, beyond our co-parenting responsibilities," she explained. "Getting to know each other again as the people we are now, rather than who we were 15 years ago." "But you like him, right?" Ethan pressed, his directness as characteristic as ever. "Not just as our dad, but as, a guy." The phrasing made Julia smile despite herself. "Yes, Ethan. I like your father as a guy. He's changed significantly from the man I was married to before. In good ways." "I think it's nice," Ava offered, her expression thoughtful. You both seem happier when you're together now, and it makes more sense for our family. Our family is complete either way, Julia clarified, not wanting the quadruplets to feel their family unit had been somehow deficient before Connor's return. Your father and I will always be your parents, regardless of our personal relationship with each other. We know, Noah assured her, but it's still cool that you guys are dating again, like a do-over, but better because you're both wiser now. The observation, so perceptive for a 15-year-old, touched Julia deeply. A do-over, but better. Perhaps that was exactly what they were cautiously building toward. As spring turned to summer, the evolving relationship between Julia and Connor became increasingly apparent to their social and professional circles. They arrived together at hospital functions. They coordinated schedules to attend the quadruplets' end-of-year school activities. They were seen dining at restaurants around the city, clearly enjoying each other's company beyond mere co-parenting obligations. So, Elena observed during one of their coffee dates, are we officially acknowledging that you and Connor are back together? Or are we still pretending this is just an elaborate co-parenting arrangement? Julia laughed at her friend's directness. We're dating, I suppose. Reconnecting. Building something new that acknowledges our history without being defined by it. And, Elena prompted when Julia didn't elaborate further. And it's good, Julia admitted, a small smile touching her lips. Better than I expected. He's changed, Elena, fundamentally. The man he is now thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to the quadruplets. He's someone I might have chosen, even without our history. That's quite an endorsement, Elena noted, studying her friend's expression. Are you falling in love with him again? Or is it more complicated than that? The question gave Julia pause. Was she falling in love with Connor? Or was this something different? A mature appreciation for the man he had become, distinct from the passionate attachment of their youth. It's definitely complicated, she acknowledged. There's history between us, good and bad. There are the quadruplets to consider. And there's the question of whether I can ever fully trust him again, given how completely he shattered that trust before. But, Elena encouraged, sensing there was more to Julia's reflection. But I find myself increasingly willing to consider the possibility, Julia admitted, of trusting him again, of building something meaningful together, not because of our past or even because of the quadruplets, but because of who he is now and how we connect in the present. The acknowledgement felt significant, a step toward embracing possibilities she had firmly rejected when Connor first re-entered their lives. Think about the courage it takes to admit you might be falling in love again with someone who once broke your heart. To acknowledge not just that they've changed, but that your feelings have evolved despite all your careful boundaries and protective walls. That evening, as Julia and Connor walked along the beach after dinner with the quadruplets, the conversation turned to the future in a way it hadn't before. The children's birthday is next month, Julia observed. Their first with both of us present. I've been thinking about that, Connor replied. I'd like to do something special. Something that acknowledges the significance of this milestone for all of us. What did you have in mind? Julia asked, curious about his perspective. What would you think about a family trip? Connor suggested. Perhaps to that lake house in Tahoe you always talked about visiting? A week away from work and school and city life. Just the six of us building memories together. The proposal was thoughtful, focused on experiences rather than material gifts, on creating family connections rather than grand gestures. The quadruplets would love that, Julia acknowledged. They've never had a vacation with both parents before. And you? Connor asked softly. How would you feel about a week together? All of us, under one roof. The question carried implications beyond the vacation itself, a test run of sorts for more permanent family integration, a step toward the possibility Noah had raised months earlier about Connor potentially moving in someday. I think I'd like that, Julia replied after a moment's consideration. It would be illuminating, seeing how we function as a family unit beyond our current arrangement. Connor nodded, understanding the significance of her acceptance. I'll look into rentals with enough space for everyone to have their own rooms. No pressure or expectations beyond enjoying time together. The consideration was characteristic of the new Connor, his awareness of boundaries, his respect for Julia's pace in their evolving relationship. As they continued their walk, Connor's hand brushed against hers, not quite taking it, but creating the possibility for connection if she chose to accept it. After a moment's hesitation, Julia intertwined her fingers with his, the simple gesture representing another small step forward in their careful reconnection. The lake house vacation proved to be a turning point. Away from work responsibilities and city distractions, Julia and Connor discovered a natural rhythm as parents and potential partners. Mornings spent hiking with the quadruplets, afternoons swimming and kayaking in the crystal-clear lake, evenings playing board games or stargazing from the deck. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension when parenting styles occasionally clashed, brief awkwardness as they navigated sharing space after years of separation. But these challenges were addressed with maturity and communication, with a willingness to compromise that had sometimes been absent in their first marriage. On the quadruplets' birthday itself, after a day of celebration and adventure, Julia found Connor alone on the deck, gazing at the star-filled sky above the lake. "The children are finally asleep," she said, joining him at the railing. "Exhausted, but happy. You made their birthday very special, Connor." "We did," he corrected gently. "Together." That's what made it meaningful for them, having both parents present, united in celebrating them. Julia nodded, acknowledging the truth in his observation. "They've adjusted remarkably well to all the changes this year has brought. Your presence in their lives, our evolving relationship." "They're extraordinary children," Connor replied, pride evident in his voice. "Resilient, intelligent, compassionate. A testament to your parenting, Julia. And increasingly, to yours as well," she added fairly. "You've become an excellent father, Connor. The connection you've built with each of them in such a relatively short time, it's remarkable." The compliment clearly touched him deeply. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means more coming from you than from anyone else." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the lake shimmering beneath the moonlight, the forest surrounding them, peaceful in the summer night. "I've been thinking," Connor began, his tone shifting to something more serious. "About us. About the future. About the future." Julia felt a flutter of anticipation, uncertain where this conversation might lead. "What about it?" "These past months have been transformative," Connor continued carefully. "Getting to know our children, rebuilding a relationship with you, discovering what truly matters beyond corporate success or material achievement." Julia nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I know we've been taking things slowly, and I respect that completely," Connor said. "Your caution is entirely justified, given our history. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have deepened beyond what I anticipated when we began this journey." The directness of his statement, his willingness to acknowledge developing feelings while respecting her boundaries, caught Julia's attention. "I'm not asking for any declarations or commitments," Connor clarified quickly. "Just sharing where I stand, with complete transparency. I've fallen in love with you again, Julia. Not with the memory of who you were when we were younger, but with the remarkable woman you've become. Brilliant, compassionate, fiercely protective of our children." The words hung between them, his vulnerability evident in the way he waited for her response without expectation or pressure. "Connor," Julia began, uncertainty clear in her voice. "You don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm not expecting reciprocation or asking you to define your feelings before you're ready. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Whatever pace you need, whatever boundaries you require, I'll respect them completely." The consideration in his approach, his prioritization of her comfort over his own desires, moved Julia deeply. This wasn't the entitled presumption of the Connor she had married, but neither was it the careful distance of mere co-parenting. "Thank you for your honesty," she said finally, "and for your patience. This journey hasn't been simple for either of us." "The most meaningful things rarely are," Connor replied with a small smile. Julia studied him in the moonlight. This man who had once broken her heart so thoroughly, now standing before her with humble honesty, asking for nothing beyond the chance to express his feelings. "I care for you too, Connor," she admitted, the words emerging with surprising ease. "More than I expected to when you re-entered our lives. The man you've become thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to our children, he's someone I find myself increasingly drawn to." The admission seemed to catch Connor by surprise, hope flickering in his expression. "Julia, I'm not ready to call it love," she continued, needing to be completely honest. There's still too much history between us, too many questions about whether I can fully trust again. But I'm open to the possibility that we might build something meaningful together. Not a return to what we were, but something new, based on who we are now. The measured response clearly meant more to Connor than a hasty declaration would have. He nodded, accepting her honesty with evident appreciation. "That's more than I dared hope for," he said softly. "Thank you for being willing to consider the possibility." As they stood together under the stars, not quite touching, but closer than they had been in 15 years, Julia felt a sense of cautious optimism about the future, not just for the quadruplets, but for herself and Connor as well. Have you ever reached that moment in healing when you realize the scars from old wounds no longer ache at every movement? When you discover that what once seemed irreparably broken might actually be mending into something new, different, but perhaps stronger at the broken places? The remainder of the vacation unfolded with a new awareness between them, not dramatically different in behavior, but with an honesty about feelings that created space for genuine connection. They continued to respect boundaries, to focus primarily on creating positive experiences for the quadruplets. But there were moments of connection that acknowledged the evolving nature of their relationship. A hand held while watching the sunset after the children had gone inside. A quiet conversation by the fire long after the quadruplets were asleep. A comfortable silence as they prepared breakfast together, moving around the kitchen with natural synchronicity. By the time they returned home, something had shifted. A door opened that had previously remained ajar, a possibility acknowledged that had once seemed impossible. The quadruplets, perceptive as always, noticed the change immediately. "So are you guys officially together now?" Ethan asked bluntly on their first evening back home. "Because you were holding hands when you thought we weren't looking, and Dad kept staring at you like in those romantic movies Ava pretends not to like." Julia exchanged glances with Connor. Both of them caught off guard by Ethan's directness, yet not entirely surprised by his observation. "Your father and I are," Julia began, searching for the right words to describe their evolving relationship. "We're building something new together," Connor finished, his expression thoughtful. "Not just as your parents, but as two people who care deeply for each other." "So that's a yes?" Ethan pressed, never one to accept vague answers. Julia smiled despite herself. "Yes, Ethan, your father and I are together, though we're still taking things slowly and carefully." "Finally!" Ethan exclaimed, pumping his fist in triumph. "Noah owes me $5. He said it would take until Christmas, but I knew it would happen during vacation." "You were betting on us?" Connor asked, torn between amusement and dismay. "Not betting," Noah clarified quickly, shooting his brother an exasperated look. "Just predicting, for scientific purposes." "Of course," Julia replied dryly. "Purely scientific. By way, and dated." Ava, who had remained quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. "I think it's good," she said simply. "You both seem happier together than apart." The observation, delivered with Ava's characteristic thoughtfulness, touched Julia deeply. Her children's happiness had always been her primary concern, the reason she had initially allowed Connor back into their lives, despite her personal reservations. To hear that they not only accepted but welcomed this development in her relationship with their father was profoundly reassuring. As summer progressed, Julia and Connor continued their careful navigation of this new territory, dating while co-parenting, building a romantic relationship while maintaining appropriate boundaries for the quadruplets' sake. They spent evenings together after the children were in bed, enjoyed occasional dinners out while Elena stayed with the quadruplets, and continued their family activities with a new underlying connection. In late August, as the quadruplets prepared to begin their sophomore year of high school, Connor approached Julia with a proposal that signaled another potential step forward. "I've been thinking about our living arrangement," he began one evening as they sat on her back deck, the children already asleep inside. "The back and forth between our houses works, but it's not ideal. The quadruplets are constantly forgetting things at one place or the other, and the logistics of coordinating schedules across two households can be complicated." Julia nodded, acknowledging the practical challenges they'd been navigating. "What are you suggesting?" Connor took a deep breath, clearly having considered this carefully. "I'm not proposing we move in together immediately. That would be premature given where we are in our relationship. But I wondered if you might consider looking at larger homes together, something that could eventually accommodate all of us, but that in the meantime could function with separate living spaces. The suggestion was thoughtfully balanced, acknowledging their growing connection while respecting the boundaries that still existed, proposing a practical solution that prioritized the quadruplets' stability without rushing their personal relationship. You mean like a duplex? Julia asked, trying to envision what he was describing. Or a house with an in-law unit? Something like that. Connor confirmed. A property where we could all be under one roof for family activities, meals, and everyday life. But that would still provide appropriate separation unless we decide to fully integrate our lives. The consideration behind the proposal impressed Julia, his awareness of her lingering caution, his respect for her need to maintain some independence even as they explored deeper connection. That's actually a very reasonable suggestion, she acknowledged. It would simplify things for the quadruplets, while giving us time to determine if a more complete merging of our lives makes sense. Connor nodded, clearly relieved by her receptive response. I've asked a realtor to identify potential properties that might suit our needs. No pressure to make any decisions quickly, just exploring options. I'd be willing to look, Julia agreed. Though any move would need to wait until after the school year begins. The quadruplets have enough transition happening already. Of course, Connor replied immediately. Their stability comes first. Always. The exchange was characteristic of their evolving relationship, thoughtful communication, mutual respect, and shared prioritization of the quadruplets' well-being above personal preferences. Have you ever noticed how the most successful relationships aren't built on grand romantic gestures, but on this kind of practical problem-solving? On finding solutions that honor both people's needs while moving forward together? In September, as the quadruplets settled into sophomore year, Julia and Connor began viewing properties that might accommodate their unique family situation. The search led them to a spacious Victorian in an excellent neighborhood with an unusual layout. A main house with 5 bedrooms and a connected carriage house that had been converted into a separate 2-bedroom apartment. The two structures joined by a covered breezeway. This could work, Julia observed as they toured the property for the second time. The quadruplets would each have their own room in the main house, with space for your home office and mine. The carriage house could be your private space for now, while we continue to figure things out. And if things progress as I hope they might, Connor added carefully, the carriage house could eventually become guest quarters, or perhaps a space for the quadruplets as they get older and want more independence. The consideration of long-term possibilities, a future where their living arrangement might evolve alongside their relationship, felt significant without being presumptuous. The location is perfect too, Julia noted. Walking distance to the quadruplet school, close to the hospital for me, and near your company headquarters. It feels right, Connor said simply. A space that acknowledges where we are now, while creating room for what we might become. After consulting with the quadruplets, who were enthusiastic about the property, particularly the large backyard and the historic character of the house, Julia and Connor made an offer that was quickly accepted. The purchase represented another step forward in their carefully evolving relationship, a commitment to creating a shared family environment while respecting the boundaries that still existed in their personal connection. The move itself, scheduled for October when the quadruplets had a 4-day weekend from school, brought unexpected revelations. As they packed up their separate households, combining furniture and belongings into their new shared but separate space, Julia found herself reflecting on how far they had come since Connor's cardiac emergency 18 months earlier. From adversaries to co-parents to cautious partners, the journey had been neither simple nor linear, with moments of doubt and retreat alongside steps forward. Yet here they were, creating a home together, building something neither of them could have imagined when he lay unconscious on her operating table. "Penny, for your thoughts," Connor said, finding her standing motionless in the empty living room of her old house, a box of family photographs in her arms. Julia smiled slightly, just reflecting on how unpredictable life can be. 18 months ago, I was a single mother who hadn't seen her children's father in over a decade. Now, we're buying a house together. Regrets? Connor asked quietly, the question genuine rather than defensive. No, Julia replied, after a moment's consideration. Amazement, perhaps, at how completely circumstances can change, at how people can change. Some things remain constant, Connor observed, his gaze warm as it held hers. Your brilliance, your compassion, your fierce protection of our children. And some things evolve, Julia countered. Your priorities, my capacity for forgiveness, our understanding of what truly matters. The exchange felt significant, an acknowledgement of both continuity and transformation in their complex journey together. Think about the courage it takes to not just forgive someone who hurt you, but to actively build a new life with them. To trust not just in their change, but in your own ability to recognize genuine transformation when you see it. The new house quickly became home, the unique layout allowing for both togetherness and privacy as needed. Family dinners in the main house became a nightly ritual, with Connor and Julia preparing meals together while the quadruplets handled homework or setting the table. Evenings often found them all in the living room. Noah working on robotics projects, Ethan conducting science experiments with varying degrees of mess, Ava sketching in her art book, Mia composing on her digital keyboard, Julia reviewing medical journals, and Connor handling business correspondence. It was domestic in a way Julia had never experienced. Even during their first marriage, when career ambitions had often kept them moving in separate orbits despite sharing a home, this new arrangement felt more balanced, more intentional, a family unit created through conscious choice rather than conventional expectation. Connor maintained his separate sleeping quarters in the carriage house, respecting the boundaries Julia still needed despite their deepening relationship. Their physical intimacy had progressed gradually over the months, from held hands to goodnight kisses to occasional moments of deeper connection, but both recognized the importance of moving carefully, of building trust alongside attraction. In November, as Thanksgiving approached, Julia found herself contemplating another potential step forward. The holiday would be their first in the new house, with Elena and her family joining them for the celebration. As she and Connor planned the menu one evening after the quadruplets had gone to bed, Julia made a decision she had been considering for weeks. "I've been thinking," she began, setting aside the recipe they'd been discussing, "about our living arrangement." Connor looked up, his expression attentive but neutral, giving her space to continue without presumption. "The separate spaces made sense when we moved in," Julia continued. "A way to create family cohesion for the quadruplets while maintaining appropriate boundaries in our relationship." "They still make sense, if that's what you need," Connor assured her quickly. "I'm completely comfortable with our current arrangement for as long as necessary." "I know," Julia acknowledged, appreciating his consistent respect for her pace. "And that's part of why I'm ready for a change. Your patience, your willingness to follow my lead in this journey, it's helped me trust again in ways I didn't think possible 18 months ago." Connor's expression shifted to one of cautious hope. "What kind of change are you considering?" "I think it's time for you to move into the main house," Julia said simply, "to fully integrate our lives rather than maintaining this careful separation." The proposal clearly caught Connor by surprise, hope mingling with concern in his expression. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel rushed or pressured in any way." "I'm sure," Julia confirmed. "Not because it's expected or convenient, but because it feels right. Because I trust you again, Connor. Not blindly or without awareness of our history, but with eyes open to who you've become and what we're building together." The words hung between them, weighted with significance beyond the practical matter of living quarters. "Julia," Connor began, emotion evident in his voice, "that means more to me than I can express. Your trust is a gift I'll never take for granted again. Separast, trest of the Sooms, Julia Klan, I'm Day. Kron." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I'm ready to give it." As they sat together in the kitchen of the home they now shared, Julia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From the devastating divorce 15 years ago to her discovery of pregnancy, from raising quadruplets alone while building her medical career, to the shocking reunion in her operating room, from cautious co-parenting to renewed connection, from separate lives to a shared future. "I love you," Connor said simply. The words offered without expectation, a statement of truth rather than a request for reciprocation. Julia met his gaze, finding in his green eyes, so like their children's, the man she had once loved, transformed by time, experience, and genuine growth. "I love you too," she replied, the words emerging with surprising ease. "Not despite our history, but with full awareness of it. Not because of who you were, but because of who you've become. The admission felt like coming home, not to the past they'd shared, but to the future they were creating together, one careful step at a time. If you've ever wondered if true forgiveness is possible, if people can genuinely change, if relationships once broken can be rebuilt stronger than before, Julia and Connor's story offers a powerful answer. Not a fairy tale of instant reconciliation, but a human journey of growth, accountability, and conscious choice. Thanksgiving brought the official announcement to the quadruplets that Connor would be moving from the carriage house into the main home, a development they greeted with varying degrees of enthusiasm and, "I told you so," satisfaction. "About time," Ethan declared with characteristic bluntness. The whole two-house thing was weird anyway. "Does this mean you're getting married again?" Ava asked, her perceptiveness as usual cutting to the heart of the matter. "We're taking things one step at a time," Julia explained carefully. "Moving in together is significant enough for now. But you're not ruling it out," Noah observed, his analytical mind picking up on the nuance of her response. Julia and Connor exchanged glances, a silent communication that had developed naturally over their months of co-parenting and reconnection. "We're open to possibilities," Connor replied diplomatically. "But our focus right now is on creating stability for you four and continuing to build our family in this new configuration." The answer seemed to satisfy the quadruplets, who quickly moved on to more immediate concerns: Thanksgiving menu requests, weekend plans, upcoming school projects. That evening, as Julia and Connor prepared for their first night sharing a home without separation, there was a moment of unexpected nervousness, a recognition of the significance of this step, despite their months of evolving connection. "We can still take this slowly," Connor assured her, sensing her momentary hesitation. "Moving into the main house doesn't have to change anything else until you're ready." The consideration in his approach, his consistent prioritization of her comfort over his own desires, reinforced Julia's certainty about the decision she had made. "I am ready," she said simply, reaching for his hand. "Not just for shared space, but for shared lives, for whatever future we create together." As they stood in the bedroom that would now be theirs, Julia felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with romantic notions of destiny or fate. This wasn't about returning to what had been lost, but about consciously creating something new, a relationship built on mutual growth, shared values, and genuine understanding, rather than youthful passion or conventional expectations. "I never thought we'd be here," Connor admitted softly. "When I woke up in that hospital bed and realized you were my surgeon, that the woman I had hurt so deeply literally held my heart in her hands, I expected nothing beyond professional care, certainly not forgiveness. Never this." "Life takes unexpected turns," Julia replied, echoing words she had spoken months earlier. "Sometimes those detours lead us exactly where we need to be, even if it's not where we plan to go." As winter settled over their city, bringing crystalline clarity to the air and holiday preparations to their household, the Hamilton-Parker family established new rhythms and traditions. Christmas in their new home brought extended family from both sides, Julia's mother visiting from Florida, Connor's sister and her family flying in from Chicago. The house filled with laughter, music, and the controlled chaos of a blended family celebration. Watching Connor with the quadruplets, on Christmas morning, his genuine delight in their excitement, his thoughtful gifts selected to match each child's unique interests, Julia felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. Not just for the quadruplets' sake, but for her own as well. The man beside her was not the Connor she had married 15 years earlier. Ambitious, sometimes self-absorbed, defining success through external achievements. Nor was she the Julia of that time, young, deferring her dreams to support his, believing love could conquer all differences. They were new versions of themselves, shaped by separate journeys that had somehow led back to each other. Wiser, more grounded, with a shared understanding of what truly mattered: connection, purpose, family, in its many forms. As midnight approached on New Year's Eve, with the quadruplets finally asleep after their determined efforts to stay awake until 12, Julia and Connor stood on their back deck, champagne glasses in hand, watching fireworks illuminate the sky. "Any resolutions for the coming year?" Connor asked, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. Julia considered the question, reflecting on the extraordinary 18 months that had transformed their lives so completely. "To continue building what we've started," she said finally. "Not just for the quadruplets, but for ourselves. To remember that second chances are precious gifts, not guaranteed outcomes. Connor nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. And to recognize that the most meaningful journeys aren't about returning to where we began, but about discovering new destinations we couldn't have imagined at the start. As the clock struck midnight and a new year began, Julia turned to face the man who had once broken her heart and now helped make it whole again, not through fairy tale romance or dramatic gestures, but through consistent action, genuine growth, and humble recognition of past mistakes. "Happy New Year, Connor," she said softly. "Happy New Year, Julia," he replied, his green eyes so like their children's holding hers, with an expression of profound gratitude and love. Their kiss beneath the fireworks wasn't a beginning or an ending, but a continuation, another step in the unexpected journey that had brought the brilliant cardiac surgeon and the tech CEO back together, not as they once were, but as they had become. Upstairs, 4 sleeping teenagers, miracles who weren't supposed to exist, dreamed peacefully in the home their parents had created, unaware of the extraordinary circumstances that had reunited their family, but secure in the knowledge that they were deeply loved. If you've ever wondered if it's too late to fix what seems irreparably broken, if the mistakes of your past define your future forever, Julia and Connor's story offers a powerful answer. Sometimes, the heart that was once broken can be mended in ways that make it stronger than before. Sometimes the longest routes lead to the most meaningful destinations. Sometimes, second chances arrive in unexpected forms, offering not a return to what was lost, but the creation of something entirely new, something better for having been tested, challenged, and consciously rebuilt. If this story touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life. And if you're still watching but haven't subscribed, tell us in the comments why, because we're genuinely curious about what's holding you back from joining our community of believers in second chances and the power of forgiveness. Spring arrived with a burst of renewal, both in the flowering gardens surrounding their Victorian home and in the evolving dynamics of their blended family. The quadruplets, now approaching their 16th birthday, had settled into the rhythm of life, with both parents under one roof, the initial novelty giving way to comfortable normalcy, occasional conflicts, balanced by deeper connection. Julia's cardiac department continued to gain recognition, with her innovative surgical techniques being adopted by hospitals across the country. Connor's company had shifted significant resources toward medical technology development, their collaborative projects bridging the gap between cutting-edge innovation and practical healthcare application. Their professional lives remained distinct yet complementary, each supporting the other's ambitions while maintaining individual identity and purpose. It was a balance they had never quite achieved in their first marriage, a testament to their growth as individuals and as partners. One sunny Saturday in April, as Julia prepared for a rare weekend shift at the hospital, Connor approached her with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking," he began, helping her gather the research papers she needed to review between surgeries, "about our future, about making this reunion official in ways beyond our living arrangement." Julia looked up, sensing the significance in his tone. "What do you mean?" Connor hesitated, uncharacteristically nervous. "I'm not suggesting we simply pick up where we left off 15 years ago. What we have now is different, stronger, more honest, built on genuine understanding rather than youthful idealism." "I agree," Julia replied, curious where this conversation was heading. "What would you think about remarrying?" Connor asked finally. "Not because it's expected or traditional, but as a conscious choice to formalize what we've rebuilt together." The question hung between them, not a surprise in its essence, given the direction their relationship had taken, but significant in its timing and implications. "Connor," Julia began, setting aside her papers to give him her full attention. "Are you proposing?" "Not exactly," he clarified with a small smile. "Or at least, not in the traditional sense. I'm not down on one knee with a ring, asking you to be my wife again. I'm suggesting we consider the possibility together a decision we would make as equal partners, if and when it feels right for both of us." The approach was characteristic of their renewed relationship, thoughtful, respectful of her autonomy, framed as mutual exploration rather than unilateral request. "I appreciate that," Julia said sincerely. "And I'm not opposed to the idea. But I'd need to understand why it matters to you. Our current arrangement works well. What would marriage add that we don't already have? Connor considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Practically speaking, very little. We're already committed to each other and to our family. We share a home, finances, parenting responsibilities. But, Julia prompted, sensing there was more to his thinking. But symbolically, it would represent something I think matters, Connor continued. Not just to the outside world, but to ourselves and to the quadruplets. A formal acknowledgement that what we've rebuilt isn't temporary or conditional. That we're choosing each other with full awareness of our past and commitment to our future. The reasoning resonated with Julia more than she had expected. Their journey back to each other had been neither simple nor guaranteed each step forward, a conscious choice rather than passive drift. There was something powerful in the idea of formally marking that journey, of celebrating the relationship they had created from the ashes of their first marriage. I can see the value in that, she acknowledged. Though I'd want the quadruplets to be part of any decision. Their stability and well-being have always been our priority. Absolutely, Connor agreed immediately. This would affect them as much as us. Their perspective matters tremendously. Julia smiled, appreciating his consistent focus on their children's needs. Let me think about it. Not because I'm uncertain about us, but because I want to be sure we're doing this for the right reasons, not out of convention or expectation, but because it truly adds meaning to what we've built. Take all the time you need, Connor assured her, leaning forward to kiss her gently. There's no rush. We're already living the commitment that matters most. Have you ever noticed how the most meaningful decisions aren't made in moments of high emotion, but in these quiet conversations where two people truly see and respect each other? Where the focus isn't on grand gestures, but on what genuinely matters to both. As Julia drove to the hospital later that morning, her mind returned to Connor's suggestion. Marriage, a concept that had once represented both promise and pain in her life, the youthful dreams of their first wedding, the devastating betrayal of their divorce. What would it mean to remarry now, with the wisdom of experience and the scars of past wounds? Not a return to what had been, but a new beginning, built on deeper understanding and genuine growth. The question lingered as she performed her scheduled surgeries, her hands steady and sure as they repaired damaged hearts, while her mind contemplated the healing of her own. That evening, returning home later than expected after a complicated case, Julia found Connor and the quadruplets in the kitchen, preparing dinner together with the easy coordination of a family accustomed to shared responsibilities. "Mom's home," Ethan announced, looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. Just in time. Dad was about to ruin the sauce. "I was adjusting the seasoning," Connor corrected with mock indignation. "A subtle but important distinction." "You were definitely ruining it," Ava confirmed, stirring the pot in question with authority beyond her years. "But I saved it." Noah, setting the table with methodical precision, simply nodded in greeting. "Tough surgery?" he asked, noting Julia's tired expression. "Challenging but successful," she replied, touched by her son's perceptiveness. "A congenital defect more complex than the scans indicated. But we managed to repair it completely. Another life, saved by the brilliant Dr. Parker," Connor said, pride evident in his voice as he crossed the kitchen to kiss her cheek. "Dinner's almost ready, if you want to freshen up." The domestic scene, so ordinary yet so precious, reinforced Julia's appreciation for what they had built together. This wasn't the carefully choreographed perfection of magazine families, but something real and hard-won a home, created through conscious choice and consistent effort. If you've ever experienced the comfort of coming home to people who truly see you, who understand both your professional accomplishments and your human exhaustion, you know the treasure Julia found in her kitchen that evening. Not perfection, but genuine connection. Later that night, after the quadruplets had gone to bed, Julia found Connor in his home office, reviewing quarterly reports for his company's medical division. "I've been thinking about your question," she said, settling into the comfortable chair across from his desk. About remarriage. Connor set aside his tablet, giving her his full attention. "And? I think I understand now why it matters to you," Julia began thoughtfully. "It's not about legalities or appearances, but about marking the journey we've taken, acknowledging that what we have now isn't simply a return to the past, but something new we've created together." "Exactly," Connor confirmed, pleased by her understanding. A conscious choice to formalize what we've rebuilt, with full awareness of both our history and our growth. Julia nodded, her decision crystallizing as she spoke. I'd like that. Not a grand wedding or public spectacle, but a meaningful ceremony that includes the quadruplets and acknowledges the complex path that brought us here. The smile that spread across Connor's face reflected genuine joy rather than triumph or satisfaction. That sounds perfect. Something that honors our unique journey, rather than following conventional expectations. But I have one condition, Julia added, her expression turning serious. Anything, Connor replied without hesitation. No proposal? She stated firmly. No getting down on one knee, no surprise ring, no traditional asking. If we do this, we do it as equal partners making a mutual decision. Together. Connor's smile deepened, appreciation evident in his expression. I wouldn't have it any other way. This isn't about me asking and you accepting. It's about both of us choosing with equal agency and commitment. The understanding between them, their shared vision of partnership based on mutual respect rather than traditional roles, reinforced Julia's certainty about the decision they were making. Then yes, she said simply. Let's remarry. Not because it's expected or traditional, but because it feels right for us, for who we've become together. Connor reached across the desk to take her hand, his touch conveying what words could not: gratitude, love, and profound appreciation for the journey that had brought them to this moment. When should we tell the quadruplets? He asked, practical considerations following emotional connection. Tomorrow, Julia decided. At dinner. They should be the first to know, and their input on the ceremony itself will be important. Tomorrow. The following evening, as the family gathered around the dining table, Julia and Connor exchanged glances, silently confirming their readiness to share the decision they had made. We have something we'd like to discuss with you, Connor began, his tone casual but carrying an undercurrent of significance that immediately captured the quadruplets' attention. Are we moving again? Ethan asked suspiciously. Because I just got my room exactly how I want it. No, nothing like that, Julia assured him with a smile. It's about our family, specifically. About your father and me. The quadruplets exchanged glances, their silent communication as effective as ever. You're getting married again, Noah stated matter-of-factly, his analytical mind jumping ahead to the most logical conclusion. Julia and Connor exchanged surprised looks. How did you know? Julia asked, genuinely curious about her son's deduction. Noah shrugged slightly. It's the natural progression. You divorced, reconnected, moved in together, established a functional family unit. Marriage is the statistically probable next step. Plus, Dad's been looking at rings online, Ethan added helpfully. He forgot to clear his browser history on the shared tablet. Connor laughed, shaking his head at the revelation. So much for our carefully planned announcement. I was just researching, he clarified, glancing at Julia. Not planning a traditional proposal, I promise. Just exploring options for when if we made this decision together. So it's true? Ava asked, her expression thoughtful. You're getting married again? We're considering it. Julia confirmed, careful to frame the discussion as ongoing rather than finalized. But your input is important to us. This affects all of us as a family, not just your father and me. What do you think? Connor asked, looking at each of the quadruplets in turn. How would you feel about us making our family officially complete in this way? The quadruplets exchanged glances again, their silent communication mysterious to their parents despite years of observation. I think it's cool, Ethan said finally, characteristically direct. You guys are already basically married anyway. Might as well make it official. From a practical standpoint, it makes sense. Noah added, his approach typically analytical. Simplified legal status, clearer family structure, social recognition of your relationship. Julia and Connor turned to Ava and Mia, who had remained quiet during their brothers' responses. Ava? Mia? Julia prompted gently. What do you think, girls? I think it's romantic, Ava said finally. Not in a fairy tale way, but in a real way. You found each other again after everything that happened. That's better than any story. And it feels right, Mia added, her musical sensibility finding the perfect note. Like when a song resolves to the chord you've been waiting for all along. The simple observations, their recognition of the authentic journey that had brought their parents to this point, touched Julia deeply. So you're all okay with this? Connor confirmed, wanting absolute clarity on their children's feelings. More than okay, Ava assured him. But can we help plan the ceremony? Not like a big wedding or anything, but something that includes us too? That's exactly what we were hoping, Julia replied, relieved and touched by their positive response. Something small and meaningful that celebrates our whole family, not just your father and me. No matching outfits, though, Ethan stipulated firmly. I draw the line at coordinated clothing. The family laughed together, the momentous decision settling into their collective consciousness with surprising naturalness, another step in their extraordinary journey. Significant, but not disruptive, to the foundation they had carefully built. Over the following weeks, plans for the ceremony took shape through family discussions and shared decision-making. True to their vision, Julia and Connor opted for simplicity and meaning over tradition or spectacle. A small gathering in the garden of their home, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. The quadruplets took their involvement seriously, each contributing ideas that reflected their unique personalities. Noah researched historical marriage customs from different cultures, suggesting elements that symbolized renewal and second chances. Ethan proposed a scientific theme with molecular models representing the bonds of family. Mia composed an original piece of music for the occasion, while Ava designed invitations featuring her artwork, a tree with 6 intertwined branches reaching toward the sky. In late May, as the date approached, Julia found herself in an unexpected moment of reflection. While trying on the dress she had selected, not a traditional wedding gown, but an elegant blue silk that complemented her fair coloring and blonde hair. You look beautiful, Elena observed, visiting to help with final preparations. But something's on your mind. I can tell. Julia smiled at her friend's perceptiveness. Just thinking about the journey that brought us here. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be remarrying Connor, I would have thought they were delusional. Life takes unexpected turns, Elena replied, echoing Julia's own words from months earlier. Sometimes those detours lead us exactly where we need to be. It's not that I have doubts, Julia clarified, smoothing the silk of her dress. I'm certain about Connor, about us. It's more amazement at how completely circumstances can change, at how people can change, including you, Elena pointed out gently. Connor isn't the only one who's transformed over these past 2 years. You've changed too, opened yourself to possibilities you once firmly rejected, found capacity for forgiveness you didn't think possible. The observation was perceptive. Julia's journey had indeed been one of personal growth alongside reconnection with Connor. Her willingness to consider second chances, to trust again despite past wounds, represented its own form of transformation. I suppose that's true, she acknowledged. Though my changes have been less dramatic than his. Different, not lesser, Elena corrected. Your journey was about opening a heart that had been carefully guarded, about risking vulnerability again with the one person who had hurt you most deeply. That requires its own kind of courage. The perspective shifted Julia's thinking, reframing her part in their reunion, not as passive acceptance of Connor's transformation, but as active participation in mutual growth and reconnection. Thank you for that, she said sincerely, and for supporting us through all of this. Your friendship has been a constant through every phase of this journey. Always, Elena replied simply. Now, let's finish getting you ready. You have a family waiting to celebrate with you. The ceremony itself unfolded with the natural authenticity they had envisioned, not a traditional wedding with its focus on the couple alone, but a family celebration that acknowledged the complex journey that had brought them to this moment. In their garden, with roses and wisteria in full bloom, Julia and Connor stood with the quadruplets beside them, rather than as observers. The small gathering of witnesses, Elena and her family, Julia's mother, Connor's sister, and her children, close colleagues who had become friends, created an intimate circle of support around them. Dr. Rivera, who had worked with Julia at the hospital for years and had witnessed the extraordinary reunion from its beginning, served as officiant, his connection to their story, making him the perfect choice to guide this unconventional ceremony. We gather today not to witness a beginning, he began, his voice warm and resonant in the garden setting, but to celebrate a journey of extraordinary complexity and beauty. Julia and Connor stand before us not as they once were, but as they have become through separate paths that somehow led back to each other. through growth and forgiveness, through the miracle of 4 children who weren't supposed to exist. The quadruplets stood proudly beside their parents, each holding a symbolic item they had chosen to represent their family's unique story. Noah, with a small model of a human heart, acknowledging the cardiac surgery that had reunited them. Ethan with a DNA helix crafted from silver wire, symbolizing the biological connection that had brought them together despite separation. Mia with a musical score of her original composition, representing the harmony they had found together. Ava with a handcrafted book containing family photographs, past, present, and space for future memories. Marriage is traditionally viewed as the beginning of a family, Dr. Rivera continued. But today, we acknowledge a different truth, that this family has already been created through conscious choice and consistent effort. This ceremony simply formalizes what already exists in heart and practice. Julia and Connor had chosen to write their own vows, neither traditional promises nor romantic platitudes, but honest acknowledgments of their complex journey and genuine commitments to their shared future. Julia, Connor began, his voice steady, despite the emotion evident in his expression. 18 years ago, we stood before witnesses and made promises neither of us fully understood. Today, I stand before you with no illusions, no idealized expectations, but with profound gratitude for the journey that has brought us here. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. I promise not perfection, but persistent effort, not blind devotion, but conscious choice, not ownership, but partnership in its truest sense. I promise to honor the remarkable woman you are, brilliant, compassionate, fiercely protective of our children, and to support your continued growth and ambitions as you have supported mine. The vow was characteristic of the man Connor had become: thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to equality rather than traditional roles. Connor, Julia responded, her voice clear despite the emotion tightening her throat. Our path has been neither simple nor direct. It has contained joy and pain, connection and separation, endings that somehow became new beginnings. I stand before you today not because fate or destiny brought us back together, but because we both chose to grow, to heal, to build something meaningful from difficult circumstances. She glanced briefly at the quadruplets beside them, drawing strength from their presence. I promise to continue choosing us, not out of obligation or convenience, but because what we've created deserves nurturing and protection. I promise to remember that love is not just emotion but action, not just feeling but choice. I promise to honor the man you have become: thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to our family, and to support your continued growth as you have supported mine. These weren't the traditional vows of first-time newlyweds, but the measured commitments of 2 people who had experienced both the breaking and rebuilding of trust, who understood the work required to maintain connection through life's inevitable challenges. As symbols of your renewed commitment, Dr. Rivera continued, you have chosen to exchange rings that represent not ownership or possession, but the continuous journey you walk together. Noah stepped forward, presenting the rings they had selected, simple platinum bands, engraved with a design that resembled a DNA helix intertwined with a heartbeat line, symbols of both their biological connection through the quadruplets and the cardiac surgery that had reunited them. As they placed the rings on each other's fingers, the gesture carried weight beyond traditional symbolism, a tangible representation of the full circle their extraordinary journey had taken. By the authority vested in me, and with the joyful witness of your children and loved ones, I now pronounce you husband and wife, partners in life once more, Dr. Rivera declared. You may seal your commitment with a kiss. The kiss they shared was neither performative nor hesitant, but a natural expression of the connection they had rebuilt, genuine, warm, and witnessed by the 4 children who stood beside them with varying expressions of approval and mild embarrassment. I now present to you, Dr. Rivera announced to the small gathering, the Hamilton Parker family, officially reunited. The celebration that followed maintained the intimate, authentic quality they had envisioned, a garden reception with music, laughter, and conversations that flowed easily among the guests who had supported their journey in various ways. Elena raised her glass in a toast that captured the essence of the occasion. To Julia and Connor, she began, her expression warm with genuine affection. Your story reminds us that sometimes the longest routes lead to the most meaningful destinations. that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. That family can be lost and found and created anew through conscious choice and persistent effort. She turned to include the quadruplets in her gaze. And to Noah, Ethan, Mia, and Ava, the miracles who weren't supposed to exist, whose presence in this world connected your parents even during their years apart. May you always know how deeply you are loved, how completely you are cherished, how central you are to this extraordinary family story. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, Julia found a moment of quiet reflection, watching Connor interact with her children across the garden, his genuine interest in Noah's latest robotics project, his laughter at Ethan's animated storytelling, his attentive listening to Mia's explanation of her musical composition, his gentle encouragement of Ava's artistic ambitions. "Happy?" Elena asked, appearing at her side with an intuitive sense of her friend's contemplative mood. "Yes," Julia replied without hesitation, not in the uncomplicated way of first love, but in the deeper sense that comes from building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. "The best kind of happiness," Elena observed. "The kind that's earned rather than simply found. Have you ever noticed that the most profound joy often comes not from perfect circumstances, but from overcoming significant challenges? From building something beautiful out of what once seemed broken beyond repair?" The afternoon unfolded with natural ease, family photographs in the garden, dinner at tables arranged beneath flowering trees, music that invited casual dancing as the sun began to set. Throughout it all, Julia and Connor moved as partners, comfortable in their connection, neither clinging nor distant. Their interactions characterized by the mutual respect and genuine affection they had cultivated over their months of reconnection. As evening approached, the quadruplets surprised their parents with a gift they had created together, a handcrafted memory box containing artifacts from their extraordinary family journey. "We've been collecting these for months," Noah explained as they presented the wooden box, beautifully carved with the family's intertwined initials. Inside, carefully arranged and labeled in Ava's artistic handwriting, lay tangible representations of their story. Julia's surgical badge from the day she operated on Connor, the hospital bracelet he had worn during his recovery, a small vial containing sand from their lake house vacation, pressed flowers from the garden where they had just renewed their vows. "There's room to add more," Ethan pointed out practically, "for future family milestones." "It's beautiful," Julia said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness behind the gift. "A perfect representation of our journey together." "We wanted something that showed the whole story," Ava explained. "Not just today, but everything that brought us here." The insight, their recognition that the ceremony was not a beginning but a continuation of an already meaningful journey, reinforced Julia's appreciation for her children's emotional intelligence and perspective. As the celebration continued around them, Connor drew Julia aside for a moment of private connection. "I have something for you," he said quietly, leading her to a secluded corner of the garden. "Not a traditional wedding gift, but something I hope carries meaning." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box, not jewelry, Julia noted with appreciation for his understanding of her preferences, but something else entirely. Opening it, she found a delicate glass sculpture of a heart, not the stylized Valentine symbol, but an anatomically correct representation, similar to the silver pendant he had given her at Christmas, yet distinct in its crystalline transparency. "It's beautiful," she said, lifting it carefully to examine the intricate details, "and meaningful. Given our history." "Look closer," Connor encouraged. At the center, Julia held the sculpture to the light, noticing for the first time a tiny imperfection within the glass heart, a small, deliberate crack that had been filled with gold, creating a gleaming line that enhanced rather than diminished the beauty of the piece. "Kintsugi," she murmured, recognizing the Japanese art form that repairs broken pottery with gold, treating damage as part of an object's history rather than something to disguise. "Yes," Connor confirmed. "The philosophy that breakage and repair become part of an object's story, making it more beautiful for having been broken. It seemed fitting for us for the heart that was broken between us and has been mended in a way that doesn't erase the past but incorporates it into something stronger." The symbolism touched Julia deeply, his acknowledgement that their relationship wasn't perfect or unmarked by pain, but valuable, precisely because of the healing they had achieved together. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them, "for understanding that our story isn't about erasing the past, but about building something meaningful from it." "Always," Connor replied, his hand finding hers as they rejoined their celebration. If you've ever been broken and found your way to healing, you understand the power of this moment. Not pretending the cracks never existed, but honoring them as part of your story filled with gold that makes you more beautiful, more authentic, more resilient than before. As evening deepened into night and guests gradually departed, the Hamilton Parker family found themselves alone in their garden, the six of them connected by both biology and choice, by shared history and mutual commitment to their future together. So, Ethan asked, sprawling comfortably in a garden chair, do we call you Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton Parker now? Or is it Dr. and Mr. Hamilton Parker? The whole name situation is confusing. Julia laughed, appreciating her son's ability to cut through sentiment to practical matters. You can call us Mom and Dad, just as you always have. The legal formalities don't change our relationships with you four, but they matter, Ava observed perceptively. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done this ceremony. They do matter, Connor acknowledged. Not because they change how we feel about each other, or about you, but because they represent a formal commitment to the family we've built together. Like making it official, Noah summarized in his practical way, putting legal structure around what already exists emotionally. Exactly, Julia confirmed, impressed, as always, by her children's understanding. The ceremony wasn't about creating something new, but about acknowledging and celebrating what we've already built together. As the quadruplets helped clear the last of the celebration debris, chattering about their favorite moments from the day, Julia and Connor found themselves alone for a moment beneath the garden trellis where they had exchanged their vows hours earlier. Happy, Dr. Hamilton Parker? Connor asked softly, his arm comfortable around her waist. Very, Mr. Hamilton Parker, Julia replied with a smile. Though I think professionally, I'll keep Dr. Parker for simplicity's sake. As you should, Connor agreed immediately. Your reputation and accomplishments are yours alone, not defined by our relationship. The understanding, his recognition of her independent identity alongside their partnership, reinforced Julia's certainty about the commitment they had formalized that day. It's been quite a journey, she observed, looking toward the house where their children's voices drifted through open windows. From that operating room 2 years ago to this garden today. The most meaningful journey of my life, Connor replied sincerely. Not despite the complications, but because of them. Because we chose this path with open eyes and full awareness of both our history and our potential. As they stood together in the garden that had witnessed their renewed commitment, Julia reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had brought them to this moment, from devastating divorce to unexpected pregnancy, from single motherhood to shocking reunion, from cautious co-parenting to genuine reconnection. None of it had been simple or guaranteed. Each step forward had required conscious choice, careful communication, and genuine growth on both their parts. Their story wasn't a fairy tale of destined reunion, but a human journey of transformation and second chances. Messy, complex, and profoundly real. What are you thinking? Connor asked, noting her contemplative expression. That life rarely follows the paths we expect, Julia replied thoughtfully. That sometimes our greatest blessings come from our most painful detours. That what seems like an ending can actually be a beginning, if we're brave enough to see it that way. Connor nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words, and that sometimes the heart that was once broken can be mended in ways that make it stronger than before. As they rejoined their children inside, moving together as a family unit created through both circumstance and choice, Julia felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with conventional notions of happily ever after. This wasn't an ending, but a continuation, another chapter in their extraordinary journey together, with challenges and joys yet to be discovered. The brilliant cardiac surgeon who had once believed some wounds were too deep to heal. The tech CEO who had once defined success through achievement rather than connection. The quadruplets who weren't supposed to exist, binding their parents together even during years of separation. 6 lives intertwined through biology and choice, through pain and healing, through separate journeys that had somehow led back to each other, not as they once were, but as they had become. A family created not by convention or expectation, but by conscious commitment to building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles For more powerful stories about love, forgiveness, and finding your way home, share in the comments if you believe in second chances. And remember, it's never too late to create the life and family you were meant to have. Spring arrived with a burst of renewal, both in the flowering gardens surrounding their Victorian home and in the evolving dynamics of their blended family. The quadruplets, now approaching their 16th birthday, had settled into the rhythm of life, with both parents under one roof, the initial novelty giving way to comfortable normalcy, occasional conflicts balanced by deeper connection. Julia's cardiac department continued to gain recognition, with her innovative surgical techniques being adopted by hospitals across the country. Connor's company had shifted significant resources toward medical technology development, their collaborative projects bridging the gap between cutting-edge innovation and practical healthcare application. Their professional lives remained distinct, yet complementary, each supporting the other's ambitions while maintaining individual identity and purpose. It was a balance they had never quite achieved in their first marriage, a testament to their growth as individuals and as partners. One sunny Saturday in April, as Julia prepared for a rare weekend shift at the hospital, Connor approached her with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking," he began, helping her gather the research papers she needed to review between surgeries, about our future, about making this reunion official in ways beyond our living arrangement. Julia looked up, sensing the significance in his tone. Connor hesitated, uncharacteristically nervous. "I'm not suggesting we simply pick up where we left off 15 years ago. What we have now is different, stronger, more honest, built on genuine understanding rather than youthful idealism." "I agree," Julia replied, curious where this conversation was heading. "What would you think about remarrying?" Connor asked finally. "Not because it's expected or traditional, but as a conscious choice to formalize what we've rebuilt together." The question hung between them, not a surprise in its essence, given the direction their relationship had taken, but significant in its timing and implications. "Connor," Julia began, setting aside her papers to give him her full attention. "Are you proposing?" "Not exactly," he clarified with a small smile. "Or at least, not in the traditional sense. I'm not down on one knee with a ring, asking you to be my wife again. I'm suggesting we consider the possibility together, a decision we would make as equal partners, if and when it feels right for both of us." The approach was characteristic of their renewed relationship, thoughtful, respectful of her autonomy, framed as mutual exploration rather than unilateral request. "I appreciate that," Julia said sincerely. "And I'm not opposed to the idea, but I'd need to understand why it matters to you. Our current arrangement works well. What would marriage add that we don't already have?" Connor considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Practically speaking, very little. We're already committed to each other and to our family. We share a home, finances, parenting, responsibilities. But," Julia prompted, sensing there was more to his thinking, "but symbolically, it would represent something I think matters," Connor continued. "Not just to the outside world, but to ourselves and to the quadruplets. A formal acknowledgement that what we've rebuilt isn't temporary or conditional, that we're choosing each other with full awareness of our past and commitment to our future." The reasoning resonated with Julia more than she had expected. Their journey back to each other had been neither simple nor guaranteed, each step forward a conscious choice rather than passive drift. There was something powerful in the idea of formally marking that journey, of celebrating the relationship they had created from the ashes of their first marriage. "I can see the value in that," she acknowledged, "though I'd want the quadruplets to be part of any decision. Their stability and well-being have always been our priority." "Absolutely," Connor agreed immediately. "This would affect them as much as us. Their perspective matters tremendously." Julia smiled, appreciating his consistent focus on their children's needs. "Let me think about it. Not because I'm uncertain about us, but because I want to be sure we're doing this for the right reasons, not out of convention or expectation, but because it truly adds meaning to what we've built." "Take all the time you need," Connor assured her, leaning forward to kiss her gently. "There's no rush. We're already living the commitment that matters most. If you've ever had to rebuild trust with someone who once broke your heart, you know the significance of this moment. Not rushing into decisions based on emotion, but thoughtfully considering what truly matters, what adds genuine meaning to the life you're creating together." As Julia drove to the hospital later that morning, her mind returned to Connor's suggestion. Marriage. a concept that had once represented both promise and pain in her life, the youthful dreams of their first wedding, the devastating betrayal of their divorce. What would it mean to remarry now, with the wisdom of experience and the scars of past wounds? Not a return to what had been, but a new beginning built on deeper understanding and genuine growth. The question lingered as she performed her scheduled surgeries, her hands steady and sure as they repaired damaged hearts, while her mind contemplated the healing of her own. That evening, returning home later than expected after a complicated case, Julia found Connor and the quadruplets in the kitchen, preparing dinner together with the easy coordination of a family accustomed to shared responsibilities. "Mom's home," Ethan announced, looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "Just in time. Dad was about to ruin the sauce." "I was adjusting the seasoning," Connor corrected with mock indignation. "A subtle but important distinction." "You were definitely ruining it," Ava confirmed, stirring the pot in question with authority beyond her years. "But I saved it." Noah, setting the table with methodical precision, simply nodded in greeting. "Tough surgery?" he asked, noting Julia's tired expression. "Challenging but successful," she replied, touched by her son's perceptiveness. "A congenital defect more complex than the scans indicated, but we managed to repair it completely. Another life saved by the brilliant Dr. Parker," Connor said, pride evident in his voice, as he crossed the kitchen to kiss her cheek. "Dinner's almost ready, if you want to freshen up." The domestic scene, so ordinary, yet so precious, reinforced Julia's appreciation for what they had built together. This wasn't the carefully choreographed perfection of magazine families, but something real and hard-won, a home created through conscious choice and consistent effort. If you've ever experienced the comfort of coming home to people who truly see you, who understand both your professional accomplishments and your human exhaustion, you know the treasure Julia found in her kitchen that evening. Not perfection, but genuine connection. Later that night, after the quadruplets had gone to bed, Julia found Connor in his home office, reviewing quarterly reports for his company's medical division. "I've been thinking about your question," she said, settling into the comfortable chair across from his desk. "About remarriage." Connor set aside his tablet, giving her his full attention. "And I think I understand now why it matters to you." Julia began thoughtfully. "It's not about legalities or appearances, but about marking the journey we've taken, acknowledging that what we have now isn't simply a return to the past, but something new we've created together." "Exactly," Connor confirmed, pleased by her understanding. "A conscious choice to formalize what we've rebuilt, with full awareness of both our history and our growth." Julia nodded, her decision crystallizing as she spoke. "I'd like that. Not a grand wedding or public spectacle, but a meaningful ceremony that includes the quadruplets and acknowledges the complex path that brought us here." The smile that spread across Connor's face reflected genuine joy rather than triumph or satisfaction. "That sounds perfect. Something that honors our unique journey rather than following conventional expectations. But I have one condition," Julia added, her expression turning serious. "Anything," Connor replied, without hesitation. "No proposal," she stated firmly. "No getting down on one knee. No surprise ring. No traditional asking. If we do this, we do it as equal partners, making a mutual decision. Together." Connor's smile deepened, appreciation evident in his expression. "I wouldn't have it any other way. This isn't about me asking and you accepting. It's about both of us choosing, with equal agency and commitment." The understanding between them, their shared vision of partnership based on mutual respect rather than traditional roles, reinforced Julia's certainty about the decision they were making. "Then yes," she said simply, "let's remarry. Not because it's expected or traditional, but because it feels right for us, for who we've become together." Connor reached across the desk to take her hand, his touch conveying what words could not: gratitude, love, and profound appreciation for the journey that had brought them to this moment. "When should we tell the quadruplets?" he asked, practical considerations following emotional connection. "Tomorrow," Julia decided, "at dinner. They should be the first to know, and their input on the ceremony itself will be important. If you've ever wondered if true healing is possible after deep betrayal, if genuine transformation can occur in those who've hurt us, if relationships once broken can be rebuilt stronger than before, Julia and Connor's journey offers a powerful answer. Not a fairy tale of instant reconciliation, but a human story of growth, accountability, and conscious choice. The following evening, as the family gathered around the dining table, Julia and Connor exchanged glances, silently confirming their readiness to share the decision they had made. "We have something we'd like to discuss with you," Connor began, his tone casual but carrying an undercurrent of significance that immediately captured the quadruplets' attention. "Are we moving again?" Ethan asked suspiciously. "Because I just got my room exactly how I want it." "No, nothing like that," Julia assured him with a smile. "It's about our family, specifically about your father and me." The quadruplets exchanged glances, their silent communication as effective as ever. "You're getting married again," Noah stated matter-of-factly, his analytical mind jumping ahead to the most logical conclusion. Julia and Connor exchanged surprised looks. "How did you know?" Julia asked, genuinely curious about her son's deduction. Noah shrugged slightly. "It's the natural progression. You divorced, reconnected, moved in together, established a functional family unit. Marriage is the statistically probable next step. Plus, Dad's been looking at rings online," Ethan added helpfully. He forgot to clear his browser history on the shared tablet. Connor laughed, shaking his head at the revelation. "So much for our carefully planned announcement. I was just researching," he clarified, glancing at Julia. "Not planning a traditional proposal, I promise. Just exploring options for when, if we made this decision together." "So it's true?" Ava asked, her expression thoughtful. "You're getting married again?" "We're considering it," Julia confirmed, careful to frame the discussion as ongoing rather than finalized. "But your input is important to us. This affects all of us as a family, not just your father and me." "What do you think?" Connor asked, looking at each of the quadruplets in turn. "How would you feel about us making our family officially complete in this way?" The quadruplets exchanged glances again, their silent communication mysterious to their parents, despite years of observation. "I think it's cool," Ethan said finally, characteristically direct. "You guys are already basically married anyway. Might as well make it official. From a practical standpoint, it makes sense." Noah added, his approach typically analytical. "Simplified legal status, clearer family structure, social recognition of your relationship." Julia and Connor turned to Ava and Mia, who had remained quiet during their brothers' responses. "Ava? Mia?" Julia prompted gently. "What do you think, girls?" "I think it's romantic," Ava said finally. "Not in a fairy tale way, but in a real way. You found each other again after everything that happened. That's better than any story." "And it feels right," Mia added, her musical sensibility finding the perfect note, like when a song resolves to the chord you've been waiting for all along. The simple observations, their recognition of the authentic journey that had brought their parents to this point, touched Julia deeply. "So you're all okay with this?" Connor confirmed, wanting absolute clarity on their children's feelings. "More than okay," Ava assured him. "But can we help plan the ceremony? Not like a big wedding or anything, but something that includes us too?" "That's exactly what we were hoping," Julia replied, relieved and touched by their positive response. "Something small and meaningful that celebrates our whole family, not just your father and me." "No matching outfits, though," Ethan stipulated firmly. "I draw the line at coordinated clothing." The family laughed together. The momentous decision, settling into their collective consciousness with surprising naturalness. Another step in their extraordinary journey. Significant, but not disruptive to the foundation they had carefully built. Have you ever noticed how the most meaningful family decisions often unfold this way? Not with drama or conflict, but with thoughtful consideration and genuine care for each person's perspective? That's the beauty of a family built on mutual respect, rather than hierarchy or tradition. Over the following weeks, plans for the ceremony took shape through family discussions and shared decision-making. True to their vision, Julia and Connor opted for simplicity and meaning over tradition or spectacle, a small gathering in the garden of their home, with only their closest friends and family in attendance. The quadruplets took their involvement seriously, each contributing ideas that reflected their unique personalities. Noah researched historical marriage customs from different cultures, suggesting elements that symbolized renewal and second chances. Ethan proposed a scientific theme with molecular models representing the bonds of family. Mia composed an original piece of music for the occasion, while Ava designed invitations featuring her artwork, a tree with 6 intertwined branches reaching toward the sky. In late May, As the date approached, Julia found herself in an unexpected moment of reflection while trying on the dress she had selected, not a traditional wedding gown, but an elegant blue silk that complemented her fair coloring and blonde hair. "You look beautiful," Elena observed, visiting to help with final preparations. "But something's on your mind. I can tell." Julia smiled at her friend's perceptiveness. "Just thinking about the journey that brought us here. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be remarrying Connor, I would have thought they were delusional." "Life takes unexpected turns," Elena replied, echoing Julia's own words from months earlier. "Sometimes those detours lead us exactly where we need to be." "It's not that I have doubts," Julia clarified, smoothing the silk of her dress. "I'm certain about Connor, about us. It's more amazement at how completely circumstances can change, at how people can change, including you," Elena pointed out gently. "Connor isn't the only one who's transformed over these past 2 years. You've changed too, opened yourself to possibilities you once firmly rejected, found capacity for forgiveness you didn't think possible." The observation was perceptive. Julia's journey had indeed been one of personal growth alongside reconnection with Connor. Her willingness to consider second chances, to trust again despite past wounds, represented its own form of transformation. "I suppose that's true," she acknowledged, "though my changes have been less dramatic than his." "Different, not lesser," Elena corrected. "Your journey was about opening a heart that had been carefully guarded, about risking vulnerability again with the one person who had hurt you most deeply. That requires its own kind of courage." The perspective shifted Julia's thinking, reframing her part in their reunion not as passive acceptance of Connor's transformation, but as active participation in mutual growth and reconnection. "Thank you for that," she said sincerely, "and for supporting us through all of this. Your friendship has been a constant through every phase of this journey." "Always," Elena replied simply. "Now, let's finish getting you ready. You have a family waiting to celebrate with you." If you've ever had a friend who sees your growth when you can't see it yourself, who recognizes your courage when you only see your caution, you understand the gift Elena gave Julia in that moment. Sometimes we need others to reflect back to us the strength we don't realize we possess. The ceremony itself unfolded with the natural authenticity they had envisioned, not a traditional wedding with its focus on the couple alone, but a family celebration that acknowledged the complex journey that had brought them to this moment. In their garden, with roses and wisteria in full bloom, Julia and Connor stood with the quadruplets beside them rather than as observers. The small gathering of witnesses, Elena and her family, Julia's mother, Connor's sister and her children, close colleagues who had become friends, created an intimate circle of support around them. Dr. Rivera, who had worked with Julia at the hospital for years and had witnessed the extraordinary reunion from its beginning, served as officiant his connection to their story, making him the perfect choice to guide this unconventional ceremony. "We gathered today not to witness a beginning," he began, his voice warm and resonant in the garden setting, "but to celebrate a journey of extraordinary complexity and beauty. Julia and Connor stand before us not as they once were, but as they have become through separate paths that somehow led back to each other, through growth and forgiveness, through the miracle of 4 children who weren't supposed to exist." The quadruplets stood proudly beside their parents, each holding a symbolic item they had chosen to represent their family's unique story. Noah, with a small model of a human heart, acknowledging the cardiac surgery that had reunited them. Ethan, with a DNA helix, crafted from silver wire, symbolizing the biological connection that had brought them together despite separation. Mia, with a musical score of her original composition, representing the harmony they had found together. Ava, with a handcrafted book containing family photographs, past, present, and space for future memories. "Marriage is traditionally viewed as the beginning of a family," Dr. Rivera continued. "But today, we acknowledge a different truth, that this family has already been created through conscious choice and consistent effort. This ceremony simply formalizes what already exists in heart and practice." Julia and Connor had chosen to write their own vows, neither traditional promises nor romantic platitudes, but honest acknowledgments of their complex journey and genuine commitments to their shared future. "Julia," Connor began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his expression. 18 years ago, we stood before witnesses and made promises neither of us fully understood. Today, I stand before you with no illusions, no idealized expectations, but with profound gratitude for the journey that has brought us here. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. I promise not perfection, but persistent effort. Not blind devotion, but conscious choice. Not ownership, but partnership in its truest sense. I promise to honor the remarkable woman. You are brilliant, compassionate, fiercely protective of our children, and to support your continued growth and ambitions as you have supported mine. The vow was characteristic of the man Connor had become: thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to equality rather than traditional roles. Connor, Julia responded, her voice clear despite the emotion tightening her throat. Our path has been neither simple nor direct. It has contained joy and pain, connection and separation, endings that somehow became new beginnings. I stand before you today not because fate or destiny brought us back together, but because we both chose to grow, to heal, to build something meaningful from difficult circumstances. She glanced briefly at the quadruplets beside them, drawing strength from their presence. I promise to continue choosing us, not out of obligation or convenience, but because what we've created deserves nurturing and protection. I promise to remember that love is not just emotion, but action, not just feeling, but choice. I promise to honor the man you have become: thoughtful, humble, genuinely committed to our family, and to support your continued growth as you have supported mine. These weren't the traditional vows of first-time newlyweds, but the measured commitments of two people who had experienced both the breaking and rebuilding of trust, who understood the work required to maintain connection through life's inevitable challenges. As symbols of your renewed commitment, Dr. Rivera continued, you have chosen to exchange rings that represent not ownership or possession, but the continuous journey you walked together. Noah stepped forward, presenting the rings they had selected, simple platinum bands engraved with a design that resembled a DNA helix intertwined with a heartbeat line, symbols of both their biological connection through the quadruplets and the cardiac surgery that had reunited them. As they placed the rings on each other's fingers, the gesture carried weight beyond traditional symbolism, a tangible representation of the full circle their extraordinary journey had taken. By the authority vested in me, and with the joyful witness of your children and loved ones, I now pronounce you husband and wife, partners in life once more. Dr. Rivera declared, you may seal your commitment with a kiss. The kiss they shared was neither performative nor hesitant, but a natural expression of the connection they had rebuilt, genuine, warm, and witnessed by the 4 children who stood beside them with varying expressions of approval and mild embarrassment. I now present to you, Dr. Rivera announced to the small gathering, the Hamilton Parker family, officially reunited. The celebration that followed maintained the intimate, authentic quality they had envisioned. A garden reception, with music, laughter, and conversations that flowed easily among the guests who had supported their journey in various ways. Elena raised her glass in a toast that captured the essence of the occasion. To Julia and Connor, she began, her expression warm with genuine affection. Your story reminds us that sometimes the longest routes lead to the most meaningful destinations, that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds. That family can be lost and found and created anew through conscious choice and persistent effort. She turned to include the quadruplets in her gaze. And to Noah, Ethan, Mia, and Ava, the miracles who weren't supposed to exist, whose presence in this world connected your parents even during their years apart. May you always know how deeply you are loved, how completely you are cherished, how central you are to this extraordinary family story. If you've ever witnessed a moment when broken pieces come together to form something more beautiful than the original, when pain transforms into wisdom, when separation leads to deeper connection, then you understand the power of what unfolded in that garden. Not a fairy tale ending, but a human story of redemption that continues to unfold one day at a time. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, Julia found a moment of quiet reflection, watching Connor interact with their children across the garden, his genuine interest in Noah's latest robotics project, his laughter at Ethan's animated storytelling, his attentive listening to Mia's explanation of her musical composition, his gentle encouragement of Ava's artistic ambitions. Happy? Elena asked, appearing at her side with an intuitive sense of her friend's contemplative mood. Yes, Julia replied, without hesitation. Not in the uncomplicated way of first love, but in the deeper sense that comes from building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. The best kind of happiness, Elena observed. the kind that's earned rather than simply found. The afternoon unfolded with natural ease. Family photographs in the garden, dinner at tables arranged beneath flowering trees, music that invited casual dancing as the sun began to set. Throughout it all, Julia and Connor moved as partners comfortable in their connection, neither clinging nor distant, their interactions characterized by the mutual respect and genuine affection they had cultivated over their months of reconnection. As evening approached, the quadruplets surprised their parents with a gift they had created together, a handcrafted memory box containing artifacts from their extraordinary family journey. "We've been collecting these for months," Noah explained as they presented the wooden box, beautifully carved with the family's intertwined initials. Inside, carefully arranged and labeled in Ava's artistic handwriting, lay tangible representations of their story. Julia's surgical badge from the day she operated on Connor, the hospital bracelet he had worn during his recovery, a small vial containing sand from their lake house vacation, pressed flowers from the garden where they had just renewed their vows. "There's room to add more," Ethan pointed out practically, "for future family milestones." "It's beautiful," Julia said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness behind the gift. "A perfect representation of our journey together." "We wanted something that showed the whole story," Ava explained. "Not just today, but everything that brought us here." The insight, their recognition that the ceremony was not a beginning but a continuation of an already meaningful journey, reinforced Julia's appreciation for her children's emotional intelligence and perspective. As the celebration continued around them, Connor drew Julia aside for a moment of private connection. "I have something for you," he said quietly, leading her to a secluded corner of the garden. "Not a traditional wedding gift, but something I hope carries meaning." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box, not jewelry, Julia noted with appreciation for his understanding of her preferences, but something else entirely. Opening it, she found a delicate glass sculpture of a heart, not the stylized Valentine symbol, but an anatomically correct representation similar to the silver pendant he had given her at Christmas, yet distinct in its crystalline transparency. "It's beautiful," she said, lifting it carefully to examine the intricate details, "and meaningful, given our history." "Look closer," Connor encouraged. At the center, Julia held the sculpture to the light, noticing for the first time a tiny imperfection within the glass heart, a small, deliberate crack that had been filled with gold, creating a gleaming line that enhanced rather than diminished the beauty of the piece. "Kintsugi," she murmured, recognizing the Japanese art form that repairs broken pottery with gold, treating damage as part of an object's history, rather than something to disguise. "Yes," Connor confirmed, "the philosophy that breakage and repair become part of an object's story, making it more beautiful for having been broken. It seemed fitting for us for the heart that was broken between us, and has been mended in a way that doesn't erase the past but incorporates it into something stronger." The symbolism touched Julia deeply, his acknowledgement that their relationship wasn't perfect or unmarked by pain, but valuable precisely because of the healing they had achieved together. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. "For understanding that our story isn't about erasing the past, but about building something meaningful from it." "Always," Connor replied, his hand finding hers as they rejoined their celebration. As evening deepened into night and guests gradually departed, the Hamilton Parker family found themselves alone in their garden, the six of them connected by both biology and choice, by shared history and mutual commitment to their future together. "So," Ethan asked, sprawling comfortably in a garden chair, "do we call you Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton Parker now? Or is it Dr. and Mr. Hamilton Parker?" "The whole name situation is confusing." Julia laughed, appreciating her son's ability to cut through sentiment to practical matters. "You can call us Mom and Dad, just as you always have. The legal formalities don't change our relationships with you four." "But they matter," Ava observed perceptively. "Otherwise you wouldn't have done this ceremony." "They do matter," Connor acknowledged, "not because they change how we feel about each other or about you, but because they represent a formal commitment to the family we've built together." "Like making it official," Noah summarized in his practical way, "putting legal structure around what already exists emotionally." "Exactly," Julia confirmed, impressed as always by her children's understanding. The ceremony wasn't about creating something new, but about acknowledging and celebrating what we've already built together. As the quadruplets helped clear the last of the celebration debris, chattering about their favorite moments from the day, Julia and Connor found themselves alone for a moment beneath the garden trellis where they had exchanged their vows hours earlier. "Happy, Dr. Hamilton Parker?" Connor asked softly, his arm comfortable around her waist. "Very, Mr. Hamilton Parker," Julia replied with a smile. "Though I think professionally, I'll keep Dr. Parker for simplicity's sake." "As you should," Connor agreed immediately. "Your reputation and accomplishments are yours alone, not defined by our relationship." The understanding, his recognition of her independent identity alongside their partnership, reinforced Julia's certainty about the commitment they had formalized that day. "It's been quite a journey," she observed, looking toward the house where their children's voices drifted through open windows. "From that operating room 2 years ago to this garden today, the most meaningful journey of my life." Connor replied sincerely, "Not despite the complications, but because of them. Because we chose this path with open eyes and full awareness of both our history and our potential." Have you ever realized that the most valuable relationships aren't the ones that come easily, but those that require conscious effort, genuine growth, and mutual commitment? That's the wisdom Julia and Connor discovered through their extraordinary journey together. As they stood together in the garden that had witnessed their renewed commitment, Julia reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had brought them to this moment, from devastating divorce to unexpected pregnancy, from single motherhood to shocking reunion, from cautious co-parenting to genuine reconnection. None of it had been simple or guaranteed. Each step forward had required conscious choice, careful communication, and genuine growth on both their parts. Their story wasn't a fairy tale of destined reunion, but a human journey of transformation and second chances. Messy, complex, and profoundly real. "What are you thinking?" Connor asked, noting her contemplative expression. "That life rarely follows the paths we expect," Julia replied thoughtfully. "That sometimes our greatest blessings come from our most painful detours. That what seems like an ending can actually be a beginning, if we're brave enough to see it that way." Connor nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words, and that sometimes the heart that was once broken can be mended in ways that make it stronger than before. As they rejoined their children inside, moving together as a family unit created through both circumstance and choice, Julia felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with conventional notions of happily ever after. This wasn't an ending, but a continuation, another chapter in their extraordinary journey together, with challenges and joys yet to be discovered. The brilliant cardiac surgeon who had once believed some wounds were too deep to heal. The tech CEO who had once defined success through achievement rather than connection. The quadruplets who weren't supposed to exist, binding their parents together even during years of separation. 6 lives intertwined through biology and choice, through pain and healing, through separate journeys that had somehow led back to each other, not as they once were, but as they had become. A family created not by convention or expectation, but by conscious commitment to building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles for more powerful stories about love, forgiveness, and finding your way home. Share in the comments if you believe in second chances, and remember, it's never too late to create the life and family you were meant to have. 5 years passed, each season bringing its own challenges and triumphs to the Hamilton Parker family. The quadruplets navigated the complexities of adolescence, academic pressures, social dynamics, emerging identities with the resilience and thoughtfulness that had always characterized them, though not without occasional turbulence. Noah, now 20, had developed into a focused young man whose robotics innovations had attracted attention from prestigious universities. His quiet confidence and analytical mind remained his defining traits. Though he had emerged from his shell through leadership roles in STEM competitions and mentorship programs for younger students. Ethan, still the most gregarious of the 4, channeled his boundless energy into environmental science and sustainable technology development. His school's eco-engineering team, which he had founded and led to national recognition, reflected both his scientific aptitude and his growing passion for addressing climate challenges. Mia had blossomed as a composer, her musical talents earning her scholarships and recognition in competitions across the country. Her compositions, complex yet accessible, technical yet emotional, reflected the balanced perspective she had inherited from both parents. Ava, whose artistic talents had evolved into sophisticated multimedia creations, balanced her creative pursuits with a surprising interest in medical illustration, a convergence of her artistic abilities and her mother's influence. Her thoughtful nature had deepened into a quiet wisdom that made her a trusted confidant among her peers. Julia's cardiac department had expanded beyond its initial scope, her surgical techniques now implemented in cardiac centers across the country. Though she maintained her position as department head, her impact had multiplied through the surgeons she had trained, many of whom now led programs in regions previously underserved by advanced cardiac care. Connor's leadership of his technology company had transformed its focus toward medical applications, creating sustainable systems that bridge the gap between innovation and implementation in healthcare settings. The foundation he had established alongside this work continued to fund targeted interventions in areas of critical need, guided by principles of partnership rather than paternalism. Their professional commitments had indeed required careful coordination and frequent travel, just as they had anticipated 5 years earlier. Yet the systems they had established, shared digital calendars, regular video conferences during separation, prioritization of significant family events, had maintained their connection despite physical distance. The quadruplets had adapted to this unconventional family structure with characteristic resilience, even finding advantages in the arrangement. International travel during school breaks had broadened their perspectives. Responsibility during single-parent periods had fostered independence. Exposure to their parents' meaningful work had shaped their own evolving values and aspirations. It wasn't perfect. There had been missed performances, scheduling conflicts, moments of loneliness during extended separations, but these challenges had been addressed with honest communication and collaborative problem-solving, strengthening rather than weakening their family bonds. Think about that for a moment, how the very challenges that might have broken a weaker family actually strengthened theirs. How the honest navigation of difficulties created deeper trust and more authentic connection than an artificially perfect existence ever could. On a crisp autumn evening, as Julia returned from a 3-week teaching rotation in Boston, she found the house unusually quiet. Typically, homecomings were celebrated with enthusiastic greetings, shared meals, and animated updates about events that had transpired during her absence. "Hello?" she called, setting down her luggage in the entryway. "Anyone home?" No response greeted her, though lights throughout the house suggested occupancy. Moving through the rooms with growing curiosity, Julia finally noticed a note on the kitchen counter, written in Connor's distinctive handwriting. "Welcome home. Follow the path of memories to find us. First stop, where it all began again." A smile touched Julia's lips as she recognized the beginning of a scavenger hunt, a family tradition Connor had initiated years earlier for birthdays and special occasions. The clue's meaning was immediately clear to her. Where it all began again could only refer to the hospital, specifically the cardiac surgical unit where she had operated on Connor's heart 7 years earlier, setting in motion their extraordinary reunion. Intrigued by this unexpected welcome, Julia changed from her travel clothes into something more comfortable before driving to the hospital. As chief of cardiac surgery, she had access to the building even after regular hours, her security credentials allowing her to enter the surgical floor where another note awaited at the nurse's station. "Here you held my heart in your hands." Literally. "Now follow the path to where we first acknowledged the possibility of something more between us." Julia smiled at the memory the clue evoked, their conversation on the hospital charity gala terrace, where they had first discussed second chances and the potential for rebuilding what had been broken. The annual gala was held at the Cliffside Hotel, its elegant terrace overlooking the bay where they had shared that pivotal conversation. At the hotel, the concierge greeted her by name, clearly expecting her arrival. "Dr. Hamilton Parker, this is for you," he said, handing her another envelope. Inside, she found the next clue. From possibility to reality. Our journey continued where 4 young voices first welcomed their father into their lives. The reference was unmistakable, the community center where Connor had first met the quadruplets, where they had begun the careful process of building relationships after 15 years of separation. Though the center had been renovated and expanded in recent years, the garden where that initial meeting had taken place remained largely unchanged. When Julia arrived at the community center, she found Ava waiting for her, a warm smile lighting her daughter's face. "Mom!" Ava greeted her with a hug. "You figured out the clues." "They weren't particularly challenging," Julia replied, returning the embrace. "Your father knows I have an excellent memory for significant moments in our journey." "That's part of the point," Ava explained, handing her another envelope. He wanted to remind you of the path we've all traveled together. Opening the envelope, Julia found a clue in Ava's artistic handwriting rather than Connor's. Where separate houses became a shared home. Where boundaries remained while connections deepened. The Victorian, Julia murmured, recognizing the reference to their first shared property, the house, with the main building and carriage house, that had allowed them to live under one roof while maintaining appropriate separation during the early stages of their reconnection. Noah's waiting there, Ava confirmed. I'll see you at the final destination. Curious about the elaborate nature of this homecoming ritual, Julia drove to their former home, now occupied by another family. In the street outside, Noah stood beside his car, his tall frame and serious expression so reminiscent of Connor that it momentarily took Julia's breath away. Right on schedule, Noah observed, checking his watch with characteristic precision. Dad calculated you'd reach this point approximately 47 minutes after finding the first clue. Your father always did have an annoying ability to predict my actions, Julia replied with a smile. Though in this case, the path was fairly straightforward. That's because it follows the logical progression of your relationship, Noah pointed out, handing her another envelope. From medical emergency to cautious reconnection to family integration. The next clue, written in Noah's neat, precise handwriting, directed her to the place where separate became together, where caution gave way to commitment, where a family formally united. The garden, Julia recognized immediately, thinking of their home's backyard, where they had held their small, meaningful remarriage ceremony 5 years earlier. Ethan's waiting there, Noah confirmed. I'll join you all at the final location. The pattern now clear, Julia drove to their current home, finding Ethan bouncing with barely contained energy beside the garden trellis where she and Connor had exchanged their vows. Finally, he exclaimed when she arrived. I've been waiting forever. Noah texted that you were on your way 10 minutes ago. Traffic, Julia explained, amused by her son's characteristic impatience. And unlike some people, I observe speed limits. Details, Ethan dismissed, with a wave of his hand, handing her an envelope. Last clue. Dad says this one might actually require some thought. Opening it, Julia found Ethan's somewhat messy handwriting. Our journey began with your hands healing my heart. Find us where the heart of our family beats strongest, where past, present, and future converge in perfect rhythm. Unlike the previous clues, this one wasn't immediately obvious. It couldn't be the hospital again that would be redundant, nor their home, since she was already there. The reference to heart and rhythm suggested something cardiac-related, but with a deeper meaning beyond the literal. Need a hint? Ethan offered, clearly enjoying her momentary confusion. Give me a moment, Julia requested, considering the clue more carefully. The heart of their family, where past, present, and future converge in rhythm. Understanding dawned suddenly. The lake house, she said confidently, where we had our first real family vacation, where you four accepted Connor as your father, where we return each summer to reconnect and reset our family rhythm. Bingo, Ethan confirmed with a grin. And now I need to hurry to beat you there, so don't drive too fast. As Ethan dashed to his car, Julia stood for a moment in the garden, reflecting on the journey Connor had mapped through his scavenger hunt, from their unexpected reunion in the operating room to their cautious reconnection at the gala, from the quadruplets' first meeting with their father to their gradual integration as a family unit, culminating in their formal commitment and the traditions they had established together. The lake house was a 3-hour drive from their city, which seemed an excessive distance for a welcome home surprise after international travel. Yet the significance of the location in their family narrative made it a fitting culmination to this journey through their shared history. As Julia drove along the familiar route to the lake, darkness fell and stars emerged above the winding mountain road. The physical journey mirrored the emotional one Connor had created through his clues, moving from the city where their reconnection began to the peaceful retreat where their family bonds had deepened and strengthened over the years. When she finally arrived at the lake house, Julia found it illuminated with warm light, lanterns lining the path from the driveway to the front door. Stepping inside, she discovered the great room transformed dining table, elegantly set, fireplace crackling with welcome warmth, and her entire family waiting with expectant smiles. Surprise, Ethan announced, unnecessarily, his enthusiasm irrepressible despite having seen her less than 3 hours earlier. "Welcome home," Connor said more quietly, crossing the room to embrace her. "Worth the journey?" "Definitely," Julia replied, genuinely touched by the elaborate welcome. "Though I'm curious about the occasion. It's not my birthday or our anniversary." "It's something else entirely," Connor explained, guiding her to the table where the quadruplets had already taken their seats. "A celebration of milestones and new beginnings." As they settled around the table, Julia noticed 5 envelopes placed beside each plate, each bearing a name in Connor's handwriting. "Before we begin dinner," Connor announced, "I'd like each of us to open our envelope. Inside is news I wanted to share with everyone, together, rather than separately." Intrigued, Julia opened the envelope bearing her name, finding a formal letter from the International Cardiac Care Consortium. As she scanned its contents, her eyes widened in surprise. "They've approved the Global Training Initiative?" she asked, looking up at Connor with astonishment. "The full funding package?" "Yes," Connor confirmed, his pride in her achievement evident. "Your proposal for establishing standardized cardiac training centers in underserved regions has been fully endorsed, with implementation to begin next quarter." "But this means," Julia began, the implications dawning on her. "International expansion of your surgical techniques." Connor completed her thought, starting with centers in Southeast Asia, then Africa, then South America. "That's amazing, Mom," Mia exclaimed. "Your methods will save thousands more lives." "Millions, potentially," Noah corrected, always precise, when accounting for the exponential impact of training surgeons who will train others. Julia felt momentarily overwhelmed by the significance of this development. A dream she had nurtured for years, suddenly becoming reality. But the travel requirements, the coordination across time zones, the logistics of implementation, all manageable, Connor assured her, especially with the support system we've built. "Which brings me to my news." He gestured for the others to open their envelopes. Inside each was information about Connor's own professional evolution, his decision to transition from CEO to chairman of his company, focusing specifically on global health technology integration. "I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations," he explained, "concentrating instead on aligning our medical technology development with implementation in precisely the regions where your training centers will be established." The synchronicity wasn't coincidental, Julia realized. Connor had been coordinating these parallel developments for months, ensuring their professional evolutions would complement rather than conflict with each other. "You've been planning this," she said, understanding dawning, "arranging for our next chapters to align geographically and purposefully." "Attempting to," Connor acknowledged, "though I wouldn't presume to make these decisions for you. This is about creating possibilities, not dictating paths." The consideration, his respect for her autonomy while seeking ways to support her ambitions, reinforced the foundation of mutual respect they had built over 7 years of reconnection. "And what about us?" Noah asked practically, always focused on logistics. "How does this affect our plans?" The quadruplets, now 20 and preparing for their final years of university, had their own trajectories to consider. Noah's robotics research, Ethan's environmental initiatives, Mia's musical compositions, Ava's artistic pursuits. "That's the second part of tonight's discussion," Connor replied, gesturing to additional documents in their envelopes. "Your mother and I have established a foundation to support each of your professional developments, wherever they may take you. Not directing your paths, but removing obstacles that might prevent you from following your passions." Julia examined the foundation details, a thoughtfully structured entity that would provide resources without creating dependency, support without imposing conditions. The balance reflected their parenting philosophy perfectly. "This is incredible," Ava said, reviewing the artistic fellowship opportunities the foundation had already identified that aligned with her interests. "And perfectly timed," Noah added, noting the research grant possibilities that would allow him to pursue his robotics innovations independently. "But what about family connection?" Mia asked. The emotional heart of the quadruplets, as always. "If Mom's establishing training centers globally, and Dad's coordinating technology implementation across continents, and we're all pursuing our separate paths, when will we be together?" It was the question that had lingered unspoken in Julia's mind, as well how to balance expanding professional impact with the family bonds they had worked so hard to build. "That's why we're here," Connor explained, indicating the lake house around them. This place has been our family anchor point through every transition. We've purchased it permanently, renovated the guest cabins, and established it as our family gathering place, regardless of where our individual journeys take us. Quarterly family retreats, Julia added. All on Wednesdays, understanding Connor's vision. Scheduled well in advance to accommodate everyone's commitments. Plus, digital connection routines between gatherings. And an annual summer reunion, Connor continued. 2 weeks minimum, all professional obligations suspended, focused entirely on family reconnection. The structure, practical yet meaningful, respecting individual paths while prioritizing collective bonds, reflected the balanced approach they had developed through years of navigating complex family logistics. You've thought of everything, Ethan observed, impressed, despite his typically skeptical nature. We've tried, Julia acknowledged. Though we know plans evolve as circumstances change, the important thing is the commitment to maintaining our connection, whatever form that takes. Have you ever noticed how the strongest families aren't those that stay physically together at all costs, but those that create intentional systems for maintaining meaningful connection despite distance and separate paths? That's the wisdom the Hamilton Parkers had discovered through their extraordinary journey. As dinner progressed, conversation flowed between practical planning and deeper reflection, the quadruplets sharing their own evolving aspirations, Julia and Connor offering insights from their professional experiences, all 6 family members considering how their individual journeys might complement rather than compete with each other. I've been thinking about combining my environmental engineering with Noah's robotics, Ethan mentioned, the idea clearly not new to his brother based on Noah's knowing nod. Developing autonomous systems for ecosystem restoration in climate-impacted regions, which would align perfectly with the sustainable healthcare infrastructure Dad's company is implementing in those same regions, Noah added, the connections between their work becoming apparent. And I've been exploring how musical therapy might support cardiac rehabilitation. Mia contributed, her composition interests evolving in a direction that complemented her mother's medical focus. While my medical illustrations could help standardize surgical training across language barriers, Ava completed the circle, her artistic talents finding purpose within the family's broader impact. The synchronicity wasn't forced or artificial, but a natural evolution of shared values, expressed through distinct talents, each Hamilton Parker finding their unique contribution to a collective vision of positive impact. You've all found your paths, Julia observed, pride evident in her voice. Not following ours, but creating your own, that somehow align with the values we've shared. Isn't that the point of family? Noah asked with uncharacteristic philosophical insight. Not replication, but evolution. Not identical paths, but complementary journeys. Precisely, Connor agreed, his expression reflecting both pride in their individual developments and appreciation for their continued connection. Which brings us to the final purpose of tonight's gathering. He reached for a small wooden box at the center of the table, the memory box the quadruplets had given them on their wedding day, now weathered by years, but still beautiful in its craftsmanship. 7 years ago, you gave us this box, containing artifacts from our family journey, Connor said, addressing the quadruplets. Tonight, we want to add new items that represent both where we've been and where we're going. Opening the box, he revealed the original contents, Julia's surgical badge, his hospital bracelet, sand from their first family vacation, pressed flowers from their garden ceremony, now joined by new additions, architectural plans for the cardiac training centers, prototype designs for medical technology implementation, and 4 smaller boxes, 1 for each of the quadruplets. These are compass pendants, Julia explained as they opened their gifts. Crafted from the surgical titanium used in cardiac procedures, with coordinates engraved on the back. The coordinates of this lake house, Connor added. So no matter where your journeys take you, you always have a physical reminder of where home is not a building or location, but the connection we share. The symbolism touched each of the quadruplets differently, Noah examining the precise craftsmanship with appreciation, Ethan immediately putting his on with characteristic enthusiasm, Mia holding hers close to her heart, Ava tracing the engraved coordinates with artistic sensitivity. We have something for you too, Ava said, the quadruplets exchanging glances in their silent communication. We've been working on it for months. There. Noah retrieved a package from the sideboard, carefully wrapped and clearly significant. It's from all of us, he explained, as he placed it before their parents. Inside was a handcrafted book larger and more elaborate than the one Ava had created for their wedding, this one containing contributions from all 4 siblings. Noah's precision engineering had created interactive elements that displayed family milestones in 3 dimensions. Ethan's environmental focus had ensured sustainable materials and production methods. Mia had composed a musical score that played softly when the cover opened. Ava's artistic vision had unified these elements into a cohesive whole, a family history that was simultaneously archive, art piece, and emotional journey. It's our story, Mia explained, her voice soft with meaning. Not just the past, but space for the future too. No matter where we all go from here, the story continues. Together, Ethan added, uncharacteristically serious. Even when we're apart. Julia felt emotion tighten her throat as she turned the pages, their extraordinary journey captured with such insight and creativity by the 4 young adults who had been at its center from the beginning. The 4 miracles who weren't supposed to exist. The 4 hearts that had connected their parents even during 15 years of separation. This is, Connor began, his own voice thick with feeling. This is the most meaningful gift we could receive. It's perfect, Julia agreed, meeting each of her children's eyes in turn. Because it recognizes that our story isn't ending as you begin your independent journeys, it's simply entering a new chapter. As the evening continued, the Hamilton Parker family moved to the deck overlooking the moonlit lake, the conversation flowing between memories of their shared past and visions of their connected future. Not with anxiety about separation, but with confidence in the bonds they had built, bonds that could stretch across continents and circumstances without breaking. Later, as the quadruplets retired to their rooms and Julia and Connor remained on the deck beneath the stars, a moment of quiet reflection emerged between them. "Did you ever imagine this?" Julia asked softly, gesturing toward the house where their children slept. 7 years ago, when you woke up in that hospital bed and saw me standing over you?" Connor shook his head, wonder evident in his expression. "Never. I hoped for forgiveness, eventually. Dreamed of knowing my children in some capacity. But this family we've built, this life we've created together, it exceeded my wildest hopes." "Mine too," Julia admitted. "When I saw your name on that surgical schedule, my only thought was getting through the procedure professionally. I never imagined we'd be sitting here now, planning global initiatives together, watching our children launch their own remarkable journeys. Life's most meaningful paths are rarely the ones we plan," Connor observed, his arm comfortable around her shoulders. "They're the ones that emerge when we're brave enough to follow unexpected openings, to trust the process even when the destination isn't clear. The wisdom earned through their extraordinary journey from devastating divorce to unexpected pregnancy, from single motherhood to shocking reunion, from cautious co-parenting to genuine reconnection, resonated deeply with Julia. "I used to believe some wounds were too deep to heal," she said, her medical metaphor particularly fitting given their history, "that some betrayals created permanent damage. Now I understand that healing doesn't mean erasing the scar, but incorporating it into a stronger whole." "Kintsugi," Connor murmured, referencing the Japanese art of mending broken pottery with gold that had become a meaningful symbol in their relationship. The philosophy that breakage and repair become part of an object's story, making it more beautiful for having been broken. As they sat together beneath the stars, the lake house quiet around them, Julia felt a profound sense of completion, not in the sense of an ending, but in the fulfillment of potential that might have remained unrealized through different choices or circumstances. The brilliant cardiac surgeon who had once believed some wounds were too deep to heal. The tech CEO who had once defined success through achievement rather than connection. The quadruplets who weren't supposed to exist, binding their parents together even during years of separation. 6 lives intertwined through biology and choice, through pain and healing, through separate journeys that had somehow led back to each other not as they once were, but as they had become. A family created not by convention or expectation, but by conscious commitment to building something meaningful from difficult circumstances. Their story continued to unfold, not as a static happily ever after, but as a dynamic journey of continuous development, personal, professional, and familial. Not perfect, but real. Not idealized, but authentic. Not simplified, but richly complex in its exploration of second chances, blended families, and relationships rebuilt from the ashes of past mistakes. As stars shimmered above the lake and the future beckoned with both challenge and promise, the Hamilton Parker family embodied the truth they had discovered through their extraordinary journey. That sometimes the longest routes lead to the most meaningful destinations. That sometimes second chances arrive in unexpected forms, offering not a return to what was lost, but the creation of something entirely new, something better for having been tested, challenged, and consciously rebuilt. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles for more powerful stories about love, forgiveness, and finding your way home. Share in the comments if you believe in second chances, and remember, it's never too late to create the life and family you were meant to have.